Good afternoon. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Today, the Rules Committee is convening to consider four separate measures: H.R. 275, H.R. 875, H.R. 394, and H.Res. 516. H.R. 275, the Special Interest Alien Reporting Act of 2025, requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to publish a monthly report on the number of special interest illegal aliens who have been encountered while attempting to unlawfully enter the United States. It is not lost on any of us on our side of the aisle that under the Biden-Harris administration, border security was virtually non-existent. It was a farce. Millions of illegal aliens from over 170 different countries flooded our nation's borders. H.R. 875, the Jeremy and Angel Seay and the Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act of 2025 makes driving while intoxicated or impaired a ground for barring a non-U.S. national from admission into the United States or deporting the individual. All three of the individuals who influenced the naming of this legislation lost their lives from automobile crashes caused by illegal aliens who were under the influence and behind the wheel. Of course, these are not the only tragic stories of Americans who've lost their lives in this way. There are many, many more. H.R. 875 is a simple, common sense piece of legislation that deserves bipartisan support. It's another necessary step in our work to restore law and order in our nation and to keep American people safe. Given these significant investments in continued ironclad, I think I have two pages stuck together. Here we go. H.R. 3944, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2026, is a true, honest reflection of our nation's long-held values of honoring Americans who have served, supporting the many military families across the nation, and reinforcing America's national security posture. This legislation is in alignment with the President's budget request, as well as the America First agenda, through provisions such as fully funding veteran health care programs, fully funding veterans benefits and VA programs, maintaining funding levels for research, mental health programs, and other programs relied upon by veterans, protecting the Second Amendment rights of veterans, and making critical investments in border security and military infrastructure that will increase readiness and protection of our nation. Given these significant investments and continued ironclad support for veterans, service members, and military families, this legislation deserves serious bipartisan support. Finally, H.Res. 516 condemns the violent riots that occurred in Los Angeles in June of this year. As I said previously here in the Rules Committee, the failure of both state and local officials in California to support the faithful execution of our laws is appalling. The violence we saw in California over the last few weeks flies in the face of the rule of law. The right to protest peacefully is enshrined in the Constitution. There is no debate about it. What is not enshrined in the Constitution is setting cars on fire, pelting federal agents and their vehicles with all manner of projectiles, and committing criminal acts that should land the person committing these felonies in jail without hesitation. This resolution sends a clear message that we are a nation of laws, not chaos and disorder. This is a good opportunity for our Democrat colleagues to join us in standing for the rule of law, and we hope they will. Before I yield to the ranking member, I'm going to offer some thoughts on recent commentary we've heard in the last few days directed at President Trump's response to escalations from despots in Iran's political regime. Yet again, we're witnessing the selective memory of some of our Democrat colleagues who've been crying foul about the president using the authority that they accepted in Democratic predecessors. Here are a few helpful reminders to refresh their memories. President Clinton ordered the bombing of mostly Serbian targets in Yugoslavia during the Kosovo War. President Obama joined a 2011 NATO bombing campaign against the Gaddafi government regime in Libya, and he led a military campaign against the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. President Biden ordered U.S. strikes against the Houthi militia in Yemen. Indeed, Congress needs to defend its Article I authority, but we need to place the strikes in Iran within the full context. Congress declares war, but President Trump does retain inherent authorities as commander-in-chief, including our national defense. There's no question that Iran is a dangerous actor in the region that has perpetuated and supported heinous attacks against U.S. service members and our allies for decades. Iran has a history of targeting Americans since the start of the revolution. More recently, it targeted U.S. armed forces through its Quds forces. The fact is that President Trump has broad constitutional and statutory authorities. Congress will continue to work to achieve the proper balance of powers, but we need to be clear that President Trump is acting in line with past executive branch actions. And no matter our policy disagreements, I hope we can all unify to condemn the latest Iranian attacks on our service members in Qatar. Our nation's service members sacrifice everything they have for this country. They need our support and unity for their mission to defend and support the Constitution against all enemies. With that, I look forward to today's discussion. I yield to the ranking member, Mr. McGovern, for any comments he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to be honest, in terms of not reading the room, this meeting takes the cake. You guys run this place. You could scrap the agenda right now, and we could debate President Trump's dangerous escalation going on in the Middle East. And instead of that, we get business as usual from Republicans, and it's unbelievable. We should be debating, right this second, debating what is happening with Iran. You guys should have the courage to come here, to explain what is going on, to justify what's going on to the American people, and what this president is doing. This president, by the way, who said he wanted no more wars, who called his opponent a warmonger, who ran for office on lower food prices. Well, 6 months in, and guess what? Food prices haven't gone down, but here we are. And Trump is launching missiles against Iran. I mean, talk about a bait and switch. Not only are we not talking about a war powers resolution right now, media reports say that Republicans are discussing rigging the rules to prevent Congress from having any debate at all. I hear you guys are considering deprivileging a war powers resolution to stop us from having a vote and having a debate. I mean, I think that's just pathetic. I really think it's cowardly. These strikes were illegal and unconstitutional. There was no congressional authorization, no authority, and I have seen zero evidence that this was done to prevent some imminent impending attack. This was a war of Donald Trump's own choice. Donald Trump woke up and decided to bomb Iran, so here we are. And let's just be clear. None of us want Iran to have a weapon of mass destruction. But I'm old enough to remember the last time a president used vague and shifting claims about weapons of mass destruction, dragging us into a war in the Middle East. Does anyone else remember that? Iraq? Trillions of dollars, thousands of lives lost, and here we are again. This isn't history rhyming or even repeating. This is like copy and paste. We've got top administration officials denying Iran is close to a nuclear weapon and then changing their tune a day later. We've got a president escalating the rhetoric and talking now about regime change. Iran is threatening to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and if they do, gas prices will skyrocket. So much for lowering costs. And let me just also say, I and many others in this body have consistently opposed unauthorized military action no matter who is in the White House. Speaker Johnson said earlier that he, I quote, never heard a Democrat balk, end quote, when Presidents Biden or Obama used the military without approval. Well, he obviously wasn't listening, because I balked, and so did a lot of other Democrats. And frankly, I really resent the implication that this is all some political game. I oppose President Obama's actions in Libya. I criticize his escalation in Afghanistan. I held President Biden to the same standard when it came to Yemen. I have been consistent on this issue, and so have many other Democrats and many Republicans as well, to be frank. So this isn't partisan. It is about our responsibility to the American people. And I have the receipts here of all the times that I have questioned the actions of both President Obama and President Biden. But this is about our responsibility to the American people. And if we're going to spend their tax money dropping bombs on another country, if we're going to put their sons and daughters in harm's way, the least we can do is have the courage to debate it and to vote on it. If you think Americans want another endless war in the Middle East, go ahead and vote for one. But I want to know why Republicans don't want to have that debate, especially while American troops are being put in harm's way because of this president's reckless and unconstitutional strikes. And let's not get started on the Republicans' horrific tax scam bill that's working its way through the Senate, which is going to rip food off the tables of hungry kids and seniors and kick millions off their health care and gut programs like Medicaid and Medicare. Republicans are happily ripping basic assistance programs from regular folks so they could give even more tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy and their billionaire donors, while also adding trillions to our debt. Once again, this committee is doing a disservice to the American people. No president, Democrat or Republican, has the authority to bomb a sovereign nation without congressional approval, period. The Constitution gives that power exclusively to Congress, and I'll be damned if I sit back while Donald Trump drags us into another endless war. And shame on this committee and this body if we don't bring up a war powers resolution and have an up or down vote on this issue. We need to restore Congress as a co-equal branch of government. And I'm proud to co-sponsor the war powers resolution of my Republican colleague, Mr. Massey, who used to be on this committee, to stop this from going any further. And again, Speaker Johnson, this is not all politics. Many of us have consistently spoken up about this for years because the American people do not want us dragged into another endless war. We need to do our jobs, and before this goes any further, we need to have a thoughtful debate. We need to ask the questions, and we need to get this right, and we need to have a vote. So I thank our witnesses for being here. I just wish that they were here on the most pressing issue that is before our nation and the world at this moment, but we're not. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back. Yeah, happy to. Oh, do I have the, can you give me the time back? I'm happy to yield to the gentleman.
Did you ask for the same debate when Joe Biden gave $16 billion to Iran in cash?
Yeah.
You asked for the same debate?
I've asked for debate on all these issues.
No. On the $16 billion that the President of the United States in cash, Obama gave $1.4 billion. Did you question that? It was all over the news.
I think we voted on the JCPOA agreement.
No, the cash that was delivered in the middle of the night.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the gentleman is talking to. I'm sorry that he doesn't want to have a debate on what we're doing right now, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that the Speaker of the House, maybe because of bad staff work, doesn't understand that many of us have been raising these questions both under Democratic and Republican administrations for years about the need for Congress to exercise its legitimate constitutional authority when it comes to war. But we should have this debate, and I would like to think that this is not not just Democrats, but Republicans should want us to have that debate. We got to get this right before we find ourselves up to our neck in another quagmire in the Middle East. I thank the gentlelady, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Norman. Let me say I believe there will be debate on this issue, Mr. McGovern. We are not having discussions about turning off privilege. So I believe there will be that debate. And I encourage all members to attend the bipartisan classified briefing with the administration tomorrow.
Clarification. So does that mean that the Rules Committee will not, in this or in any future rule, deprivilege the Massey resolution?
I do not anticipate that happening.
Well, I'm encouraged by her assurance, because it is privileged, right?
Without objection, any prepared statements that our witnesses may have will be included in the record. I now welcome our first panel. Representative
I would like to think that this is not a not just Democrats, but Republicans should want us to have that debate. We got to get this right before we find ourselves up to our neck in another quagmire in the Middle East. I thank the gentle lady, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Norman. Let me say I believe there will be debate on this issue, Mr. McGovern. We are not having discussions about turning off privilege. So I believe there will be that debate. And I encourage all members to attend the bipartisan classified briefing with the administration tomorrow.
Clarification. So does that mean that the Rules Committee will not, in this or in any future rule, deprivilege the Massey resolution?
I do not anticipate that happening.
Well, I'm encouraged by her assurance, because it is privileged, right?
Without objection, any prepared statements that our witnesses may have will be included in the record. I now welcome our first panel, Representative Carter, Representative Wasserman Schultz from the Committee on Appropriations. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Representative Carter, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. McGovern, and the other members of the committee for the opportunity to appear here today to discuss the fiscal year 2026 Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies appropriations bill. I want to thank Appropriations, a little closer. All right, I want to thank Appropriations Chairman Cole for his leadership in getting this bill through the committee. I also want to recognize the ranking member and of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, and the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, for their help in getting us to this point. I value my relationship with Ms. Wasserman Schultz, and as I have said before, while we don't always agree on everything in the bill, we do agree on the importance of taking care of those who sacrificed so much for us. This is a special bill because it supports our troops, their families, and the nation's veterans. For fiscal year 2026, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies bill discretionary allocation is $152 billion, a $5 billion or nearly 4.3% increase from the fiscal year 2025. I want to briefly highlight some of the priorities this bill addresses. It fully funds veterans' health care, provides for advancement for toxic exposure fund into the future. It includes $943 million for medical prosthetic research, addresses longstanding concerns of mental health and homelessness among veteran populations, includes nearly $14 billion for military construction and $470 million increase over the fiscal year 2025. This bill increases investments to address barrack deficiencies, bolster investments in DoD laboratories, assist in demolishing obsolete infrastructure, and provides $2 billion in military housing. In closing, this bill supports those who have satisfied and sacrificed for our country, and we maintain our commitment to the well-being both of the service members and the veterans. I look forward to and working with all of you as this bill moves forward. Again, I want to thank you for considering the amendments to this bill from members on both sides of the aisle. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to testify here today. And I yield back.
Thank you, Judge Carter. Representative Wasserman Schultz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, my fellow 2004 classmate, Ranking Member McGovern. I'm pleased to share my concerns as Ranking Member of the MilCon VA Subcommittee with the FY 2026 Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill, H.R. 3944. Traditionally, the MILCON VA bill is one of the few appropriations bills that has bipartisan support, which is why we're usually first, because it's generally written around our shared goal of supporting our service members, veterans, and their families, no matter who holds the majority. And I concur with my friend, Judge Carter. He and I work very well together, have many mutual understandings about how this bill should be shaped, and inevitably have a divergence on at least some issues. Unfortunately, the traditional bipartisanship has crumbled this go around because the Republican majority sadly continues to insist on including partisan riders and now supports this administration's unprecedented illegal actions when it comes to the VA. How did we get here? First, we still don't have a detailed budget request from the administration. Please let that sink in. In fact, this is the latest the budget has ever been. So the bill before us today blindly supports the administration's requests with zero justification. For example, there's a 67% increase, nearly an additional $14 billion to medical community care, yet we have not one sentence of explanation from the administration why this increase is needed. Community care is needed for rural veterans and specialty care and when appointments to a VA are scarce. But a massive 67% increase request demands robust justification. This bill supports a brand new $970 million housing program dubbed, quote, Bridging Rental Assistance for Veteran Empowerment. Again, we have not received a single sentence explaining what this program is. Committing billions of taxpayer dollars without knowing how it will be spent is a clear case of intentional fiscal negligence. That's why in our 11-hour full committee markup of this bill that ended at 2 a.m., Democrats offered several amendments aimed at transparency, simple transparency. Democrats asked for reports on DOJ and its access to private veteran information. We asked for spend plans on the 67% community care hike. We asked for a report on how tariffs will raise military construction material costs, and many other transparency-seeking amendments. Republicans objected to every single one. Heads firmly in the sand, they pretended this administration is acting in a normal manner. It's a shocking abrogation of congressional oversight. That is also why I'm offering similar amendments today, 4 in total. 3 of these amendments seek transparency, a spend plan on the increase to community care, a report on the impact of tariffs on military construction, and a report on DOJ and its access to personal and private information. Our veterans and we as members of Congress deserve that information. I've also offered a 4th amendment to address a disturbing revelation that VA removed certain protections for political affiliation and marital status from its VHA guidance, leaving open the possibility for VA to discriminate in hiring and in treatment based on these grounds. I hope these amendments can be made in order so we can exercise our duty of oversight. Second, the subcommittee only held a total of 2 budget hearings. We normally hold at least 5. We didn't even hear from the military services on their budget needs. Especially as this administration engages our military in war, that's egregious fiduciary neglect. This bill underfunds military construction by $904 million. If we held these hearings, we could openly debate the merits of the service's military construction and family housing requests. This bill underfunds the NATO Security Investment Program by $188 million. Our service members and European allies need this infrastructure, given raging global conflicts. How is this possible? As we and our allies face Russian threats, we shouldn't underfund this region's needs. So long as Russia wages an illegal war in Ukraine and threatens Europe, we must clearly stand with our NATO allies who stood by us for decades. The committee has only passed allocations for 4 out of 12 subcommittees, so we have no idea how other bills will fare. Other bills that fund programs upon which our veterans rely, like housing assistance in the THUD bill and financial aid in the LHHS bill. That's not sound budgeting, it's hiring a blindfolded accountant. Simply put, this process was rushed forward without critical information, which is Appropriations 101. What is clear is that this bill does not fully address the needs of our service members and veterans. With regard to the VA, I'm pleased that during full committee markup, I was able to work with Chairman Carter, as we so often do, to secure $51.7 billion in advance funding for the Toxic Exposures Fund. Advance funding the TEF does nothing more than provide certainty that funding will be available when it's needed for veterans who have been subjected to toxic substances, keeping the commitment we made to them during in the PACT Act. But it truly is a shame that this bill includes 8 poison pill riders. Absent these riders, it would be far easier to reach agreement on a bipartisan basis. I want to single out just a few toxic provisions. The bill again prohibits the VA from implementing its interim final rule to protect a woman's right to an abortion and counseling. While Republicans use this historically bipartisan bill to further limit women's health care access, it ignores whether an abortion is in the veteran's best medical interest. Disturbingly, Republicans think veterans should only have access to abortion if they're dying. So this bill has the government making personal medical decisions for veterans, not their doctor or the veterans themselves. It's a cruel, ironic way to treat those who fight for our freedoms by taking those freedoms away. This bill also undermines VA's ability to keep at-risk veterans safe by preventing VA from reporting a beneficiary to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. This help keeps guns out of the hands of those who federal law prohibit from purchasing or possessing firearms. It, in effect, bars VA from following a law intended to protect veterans. With these and other serious concerns, I cannot in good conscience support this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to present my concerns. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. Judge Carter, is there anything that Ms. Wasserman Schultz said that you'd like to respond to in any way?
Yes, ma'am. On the issue of the abortion,
Is it on? The
we'll
red
use the
light?
Hyde Amendment. We've used it since '97, and nothing's changed. And that's basically, that's kind of a done deal.
Okay.
We had a debate on the more than 1 year on this cleanup, and we debated it well, and we finally got off and made a deal. I have a thing against this government building up slush funds and then letting them sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there, and then all of a sudden somebody uses it for something else. And so that was my whole issue on that. Debbie made great arguments, and I agree with her arguments. And so we basically put it aside and started to work on it. We ended up with an agreement that we basically doubled again the funding that we had $52 billion, I think, to start, and I gave it to $51 billion second time around for that fund. Okay, sorry. But I said we're going to use this within a 2-year period of time, and if we don't use it within a 2-year period of time, then it goes back to the Treasury, which to me means that it's going to be used to do what we're needing to do, and if we don't get it done, you can't sit on it and use it for something else. We want to go back to the Treasury, and those are the two really contentious things we had. We've had, we took out an awful lot of what they consider poison pills out of our bill because we felt like this administration was going to take care of those poison pills anyway, no matter which way it went. And so I just didn't include a lot of things we included this a year ago because there's no reason to have the debates over those things. Those things will be taken care of by the administration.
Yeah, my understanding is it represents an $82.6 billion increase above the FY25 enacted level for the Department of Veterans Affairs.
That's right.
Okay.
And she's absolutely right. And I think everybody in the Appropriations Committee and every committee and subcommittee knows we haven't gotten all the information that we need. We have no charts. We have no telling us this is that we're going to be done, this is going to be done, which we rely on, and we haven't. Chairman Cole's position is we are trying to get a bill ready so we actually have an appropriations bill this year.
Right.
We haven't had one for a while. And as these things come in, we will make adjustments, and I think that's a fair way to handle it.
Okay. One more question. So given the cash infusion, don't you believe the logic of the Democrat colleagues is self-defeating with respect to DOJ? DOJ is canceling rogue credit cards from agencies asking asking for receipts for reimbursements by agencies, and finding money being squandered on LGBTQ comic books and operas, and the Democrat positions to stand against the $82 billion cash infusion for veterans in protest. Do you agree this opposition is self-defeating?
Yes, I do, but feel it's self-defeating. In addition, I have a lot of confidence. There's a lot of noise about 80,000 firings, something like that. I don't anticipate the way they have it set up. They've set the programs that they need to continue, and nothing can be touched in those programs. And I trust the chairman to make wise decisions on the people who should and should not be continued in their job. That's if you're not doing anything and you're just waiting for your retirement, then go ahead and retire. And that's probably my thoughts on that issue. But that issue really doesn't affect us. We are dealing with appropriated funds here, and we're not dealing with the funds that go on forever. Whereas DOE's is dealing with those funds, and that's somebody else's problem besides ours.
Thank you, Judge Carter. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Yeah, well, thank you. I have a very different opinion of DOGE than the both of you. Since taking office, the Trump administration and DOGE have continuously overstepped the law. They've overstepped the law. Their efforts have been paused or blocked by federal courts 189 times. I mean, it's incredible. That's many more cases, by the way, are in progress. Mass firings and then reinstatement of those fired have caused chaos and disruption to veteran services. I hear that from veteran services in my home state. And I'm sure if you talk to the veteran services in your state, you'll hear the same thing. Contracts that provide direct services to veterans have been canceled without explanation. Critical programs like the one to help veterans avoid foreclosure have been shuttered, again, without any explanation. I mean, DOGE was given full, unfettered access to private veteran data, including their Social Security numbers. Yet, the bill before us does nothing to address these very real, concerning, and potentially illegal actions taken by this administration. These concerns should not be partisan. If a Democratic president did any of this, Republicans would be apoplectic, and rightly so, and rightly so. So, Judge Carter, why did you decide to ignore these problems in this bill, and why did you not include anything to prevent the administration from mass firing VA workers or ending contracts and programs without approval by Congress or protecting veterans' personal information? I mean, it seems to me that, again, the administration shouldn't be doing much of what they're doing through DOGE. Federal courts have interceded and required them to change the position. Why aren't we kind of reinstating here? Why aren't we protecting these programs and these personnel?
We are appropriators. We appropriate the funds with the numbers we get. Right. And that's the number one reason why I don't think we do. Secondly, as far as those various courts, I was a judge for 21 years. I know how many lawyers do know which judge to go to get the result that they want, and that's what's going on.
I don't know, Ms. West-Michelle.
Ultimately, it's going to get to the Supreme Court on every one of these issues, and I think they clearly already are showing that they're cleaning up much.
Yeah, I thought when we appropriate funds, then that means that the administration has to respect that. But do you have a different opinion? I
do not have a different opinion on anything that you just talked about, Ranking Member McGovern. We appropriate funds that fund the salaries of all the staff at the VA. And we actually, both in bipartisan outreach as well as in the ranking members of the House and Senate outreach of our subcommittee, have inquired both in a public hearing with Secretary Collins, who refused to answer our questions or give us any information or detail on the contract cancellations, detail on who was being fired, on, we ended up having to file the amendment in the full committee markup on DOJ transparency because the VA has completely stonewalled everyone in Congress, the authorizers, the appropriators. They won't tell us anything about how they're spending the money, how they're moving money around. Judge Carter and I, as well as Ranking Member DeLauro and Chairman Cole, communicated very directly during our markup to the chairman, to the secretary, that his hundreds of millions of dollars in transfer from one account to another without requesting a reprogramming for approval by the Congress was illegal. And we had a back and forth with him in which all of us on both sides of the aisle said he was wrong and needed to tell us and needed to come to us for approval. But they continue to act unlawfully, and they continue to really give us an opaque understanding of what they're doing and intentionally trying to block out the ability of Congress and the House as the Article 1 responsibility we have in the appropriations process of being able to be a check on the administration and also make the decisions as appropriators.
No, I appreciate that, and I really do think that we ought to be a better check, no matter who's in the White House,
Either way.
because that's our job.
I agree.
Otherwise, why are we even here? If we appropriate monies and they do whatever the hell they want to do with them. Representative Wasserman Schultz, my understanding is that the Republican drafted bill that you marked up in your committee originally did not include any advanced funding for the Toxic Exposure Fund for veterans' medical care. But Democrats were able to amend the bill to include over $50 billion in funding for this account. Can you talk about what happened in your committee markup and why this funding is so important for our veterans?
Yes, and I'm appreciative that Judge Carter and I, frankly, because of the longstanding relationship we have and both of us being in this role, either in the roles we're in now or when the majority switches, have enough trust built up that we were able to step to the side and postpone a decision on the amendment that I initially introduced that would reestablish the $51.7 billion in the advance funding for FY27. I want to make sure that everyone understands the TEF is not a slush fund by any means. It was created in the PACT Act to make sure that because we have such an erratic process that we go through that doesn't always guarantee we get finished on time, that there is continuity in the appropriations process, that if we are delayed, we end up having potential for interruptions. We have advanced funding in our bill for longstanding policy for medical care, and when we passed the PACT Act, we established an advanced funding in the Toxic Exposure Fund, which is mandatory funds, so we can keep our commitment to toxic exposed veterans that they would have guaranteed funding. And the PACT Act lays out clearly how funds in the TEF are to be used, and unless the administration wants to break the law, which I guess is possible given their track record so far, the funds should be obligated in accordance with the PACT Act, and they do not become available. The advanced funds for FY27 in the Toxic Exposures Fund doesn't become available until October 1st of 2026. That's the first day of the fiscal year of FY27, and the administration can't touch those funds until that time. So that's the opposite of slush fund. That is very proscribed, specific direction on how to spend that money. And we did, in the agreement we reached, put a limitation that those funds would expire in 2 years if they were not expended. But we'll come into FY27 in the next process, and presumably we'll agree upon an advanced funding for FY28 so that we have that continuity. So it is certainly not a slush fund, and it is absolutely essential. And we've had an ongoing disagreement over, since the PACT Act passed, on whether or not there should be a funding in a toxic exposure fund. That is the only way that we can keep our commitment in the guaranteed funding to our toxic exposed veterans.
Did you want to add? You want to add something?
Just to correct the mistake you said, we had $52 billion in our bill to start. It was advanced funding.
For FY26.
You said you had no funds for this program. We had $52 billion. It's certainly not no funds.
We talk about advanced
We
funding.
had current year
And
funding.
it was advanced funds that we didn't have.
I mentioned advanced
And we
funding.
had a debate over it, and
right,
we had discussions, and we made a compromise, and I agreed to the compromise.
No, and I appreciate that. No, and in my question, I mentioned advance funding.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Carter, this
I
bill,
want to make it clear.
Yeah.
We funded this program to the tune of $52 billion. It was the advance funding that we had this discussion over.
right, and that's what I asked.
It was
Yeah.
solved in our committee, I think, through the way this place is supposed to work, both sides.
No, and I'm glad.
were reasonable, and we
no.
came up with a
I'm glad.
compromise.
Let me just one other question. Judge Carter, this bill underfunds military construction by almost $1 billion compared to what President Trump requested. That includes underfunding the NATO Security Investment Program by almost $200 million. My question is, why did you decide to underfund military construction, and in particular to the NATO commitments so much lower than what President Trump requested? And then, Representative Wasserman-Schultz, how does underfunding military construction projects affect the quality of life of service members, and why is it important that we fund our NATO commitments?
We marked to last year's budget and plussed it up. We expect when the White House gets the rest of the information to us, we will probably be going to visit this again. But we basically took the position that we looked at what we did last year before we did a CR, and we came up with we marked at more funds than was in 25.
Thank you. Ms. Wasserman-Schultz?
Underfunding military construction by almost $1 billion is really incredibly irresponsible. I mean, it's almost $1 billion less than was in the president's budget information that was choppy information to begin with that he gave us. So, and then in particular, the $188 million less than the president requested, no lover of NATO, by the way, for the NATO Security Investment Program. I want to explain to members the difference between NATO funding, where there's a separate debate about different nations' contributions, and the infrastructure program that is the NATO Security and Investment Program. So the House bill provides $293 million for that infrastructure program for NATO. That's $188 million less than what is needed based on the president's request. Funding for this program are not arbitrary numbers. They're the result of already agreed upon U.S. cost share for NATO projects, and our allies in NATO, they robustly meet their obligations in the infrastructure program. And given the conflict, and particularly the risk and war that is going on in, for the illegal invasion that Russia committed against Ukraine, it's absolutely essential that we meet our obligations and plus that $188 million back up. Ms. Captor, Marcy Captor from Ohio, offered an amendment to restore that NATO funding, but unfortunately the majority rejected it. I'm certainly hopeful that in the ongoing discussions, when we have more information, that we can also restore that funding as well.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith? I don't have any questions. Thank you. Mr. Norman? No questions. I'm sorry. Ms. Scanlon?
He still has no questions.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Ranking member?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. You raised a number of interesting issues, and I think you both discussed the fact that we still haven't received a full budget from the White House, so that makes a lot of what's going on here hypothetical, but there were several issues that you raised, and there's been some discussion of slush funds. I was really concerned by the idea that there are these pots of money, tens of billions of dollars, that would be dedicated to privatized medical care, and then more billions of dollars dedicated to private housing. I'm concerned with a lot of the transfer of funding to corporate and non-governmental entities that we're seeing increasingly under this administration, that to have something like that happening with no oversight and no clear guardrails is concerning. Can you talk about that?
I share your concerns on the medical community care transfer, shift of an increase that is 67%, that's $14 billion, nearly $14 billion increase to medical community care, private health care. It doesn't make sense to me. When we passed the Mission Act was pretty specific about when private community care was going to be available to our veterans. And that was, in instances when it was too far away for a veteran to get specific specialty care so they could go to the community, particularly in rural areas. That happens when the timeliness of getting an appointment was a challenge. But now we actually see that it takes longer in the community to get an appointment than it does to get it at the VA. And I mean, I think we all hear from our veterans that they clearly prefer care at the VA, because the care at the VA is delivered in a way that in a cultural way that understands veterans' needs. A huge percentage of VA employees are veterans themselves. There's an understanding of PTSD and so many of the healthcare challenges that veterans face. They're just not understood in the same way. So we've had no explanation at all. I wish I could share with you why there is such a massive shift to community care funding, other than that it deeply concerns me that the administration is intending to shift the VA as much towards privatized care as possible, so as to ultimately, meet Project 2025's goals, which is to privatize the VA. And so that's deeply concerning. This privatized housing program, I wish I could tell you. I don't think Judge Carter could tell you either, because there was absolutely no budget justification for it. They didn't explain anything about what their intent is, yet the funding was provided in the majority's mark.
We certainly know there are real estate developers who could be salivating over getting that funding.
Certainly.
There's been some discussion about whether or not this bill could have, or the committee could be addressing the layoffs and the turfing of VA employees. I've got a couple big facilities in my region, and we certainly heard from a lot of folks, many who were recent hires, because they went for the probationary employees first. Right. So these aren't people who are, retiring, waiting for retirement to happen. These are people who are, at the prime of their time with the VA. What could be done?
Numerous things could be done. I thank the gentlelady for her question, and that we should have included in this bill transparency in what the plans are by the VA for the staffing of the VA. I mean, they made clear and publicly announced that we have a further 80+ thousand employees. Respectfully, Madam Chair, these are not just excess positions. They're not, the random, inexplicable, unacceptable expenditures of funds. There isn't 80,000 employees worth of excess in the VA, and I'm all for efficiency. But we offered amendments to make sure that the VA had to give us transparent, clear explanations of the employment decisions that they were making and the staffing decisions they were making. The majority defeated those amendments. The majority seems to not want any information. They just seem to want to allow the VA to have free rein over the quality of life of our veterans, and without any explanation. We have homelessness issues, we have suicide prevention, we have challenges in terms of getting them the care that they need, the specialty care, and I mean, we're allowing the wholesale dismissal of employees and the expenditure of funds without explanation and detail for the Appropriations Committee and for the Congress, who have the constitutionally designated responsibility to provide, to appropriate these funds and take care of our veterans. And it seems that there's only one party that is committed to doing that.
And it certainly has been concerning in our areas. We've seen, these wholesale cuts without a clear plan for how services will be able to be provided, and particularly where so many of the folks who've been cut are folks who are charged with things like operating the suicide hotline. That's a relatively new initiative.
There were firings in that program.
Right,
And
right.
that were handled by DOJ, and we have gotten no explanation as to where those firings came from, why they were done, what DOJ has done with the private data and information that they've been allowed to access, lawsuits that have blocked that access. I mean, what are they afraid of showing us? I mean,
And of course, as you mentioned, that with the firings, there are so many people who are veterans employed by the VA that there's been a particularly big impact on our veterans, and we've
Yes.
heard that in my office repeatedly. You also, I think we also heard that there are restrictions in this bill on reporting to the Firearm Background Check Agency, the NICS
yes,
program.
they
How
actually,
does that make sense? We're talking about folks who are experiencing some kind of medical or mental health issue.
right.
I mean, we've seen mass shootings as a result of folks who are veterans not getting reported to the NICS system.
Yes, the Section 260 in the Milcon VA Appropriations Bill prohibits VA from reporting a person who has been deemed mentally incapacitated, mentally incompetent, or to be experiencing an extended loss of consciousness to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. In other words, under federal law, already, people in that category of individuals, of diagnosis, are required to be reported to the instant criminal background check system to bar them from purchasing a weapon. This prohibits the VA from following the law. And we know when someone has had that designation that they are a risk to be of danger to themselves or others. And it undermines VA's ability to keep at-risk veterans safe, the employees safe. It stops us from being able to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. I mean, there's three categories of ways that you are prohibited from purchasing a gun, and mental incapacity is one of them. But inexplicably, the majority is allowing people with that designation, mentally unstable, incompetent people who have been designated as such by the VA, to continue to purchase guns unfettered.
That's pretty mind-boggling to the extent that our colleagues across the aisle say that our gun fatalities, our gun violence issue in this country is not the result of guns, but of mental health issues. If they're then putting barriers with respect to addressing
Right.
the connection between the two.
I want to just point out, veterans make up about 1 in 5 adult firearm suicides, and we see an average of 4,600 veteran firearms suicides every year. I mean, so for this bill to allow more people who are in a mentally fragile state to be able to purchase guns in contravention of federal law, that's just unacceptable and will cause more needless deaths and injuries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. We'll go back, start with the firearms, okay? Under this provision, it would allow VA to send veterans information to the FBI without a judge's consent, which is not right. This has been the law of the land over the last 2 fiscal years and was a bipartisan agreement. While I know veterans' health, mental health care is a concern, our bill and report includes language regarding the firearm lockbox program as a tool for veterans to safely store their guns. We provided $31 million for Veterans Crisis Line and $698 for Veterans Suicide Prevention Outreach. On the issue of the staff, as I said before, I'm aware of the $80,000 reduction that has been mentioned in the press and other places. We've seen no evidence of any of that, and have had no, and at 80,000, that 80,000 number, I don't think that 80,000 number will materialize. The VA has reinforced the health care and benefits by safeguarding 350,000 mission-critical positions to ensure uninterrupted services. Furthermore, the bill was written and the budget does not include personnel cuts from us at any point. The Secretary As repeatedly stated, the VA won't cut jobs that directly impact health care or benefits for the veterans. I would share similar concerns if this affected mission-critical positions, but as I mentioned, those positions are exempt.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, but I know from the VA services in my area that while they might designate a doctor as mission critical, they're not designating the folks who make the appointments or get the insurance benefits or clean the labs as mission critical, and so we are starting to see backups and problems with folks getting services.
Ms. Scanlon.
Did you want to say something
Yeah, I
else?
just,
Finally, let me
I think it's my time, and I asked Ms. Wasserman Schultz. You have a whole row of people who get to you.
I just want to point out that there's nothing in this bill that actually protects staffing or specifically underscores that there won't be any reductions in force for healthcare-related positions. I don't understand how you could possibly think that 80,000 people being fired would not affect delivery of healthcare. And we attempted to put language in the bill that would make sure that they gave us information about how they're making those decisions and what the decisions would include, and we couldn't even get agreement on that. So, I mean, taking at face value what they say is not enough. I mean, that's why we have a system of checks and balances, and that's why we're a co-equal branch of government. On the NICS issue and what Judge Carter referenced, I want to just outline the process briefly of when a veteran would have their rights, their name referred to the NICS system. When VA makes a determination that a fiduciary is needed for a veteran, it's not a determination that's made lightly. There's an extensive bureaucratic process in place to protect veterans, especially those who have been deemed incapacitated or mentally incompetent, to determine when a fiduciary is needed. If the veteran believes that determination is wrong, they have a right to appeal. If a veteran believes they were wrongly reported to NICS, which would stop them from purchasing a gun, they can have their rights restored through the court system, and some do. What it essentially does, this rider essentially says, VA, you cannot work with NICS, even when it means more veterans will be protected from harming themselves than those temporarily inconvenienced by not owning a firearm for pleasure. I mean, I want to just point out that every single veteran who committed suicide with a firearm, every single one. So this is a real issue, and we get notifications in our subcommittee on whenever there's a suicide on VA property. Over the last year, we received suicide notices from Asheville, Los Angeles, McAllen, Minneapolis, Las Vegas, South Texas, Puget Sound, and the list goes on. So we have to make sure that we aren't just taking VA, off the table when it comes to ensuring that people who shouldn't have a gun because they're a danger to themselves or others can't get one.
Well, when the mental health is such a driver in firearm suicide, and it's 60% of firearm deaths are as a result of suicide, but it often gets swept under the rug because of mass shootings being so much more horrifying in the news or whatever. But this is clearly something that if we're talking about the VA providing mental health care, that they should be part of the system. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Wasserman Schultz, I will tell you that in my community, which is very rural, there is a big push to want to use community facilities as opposed to having to drive long distances to VA. I think the point is to give veterans the choice to be able to do that. So,
But Madam
just so you-
Chair-
it's not an attempt to privatize VA. It's an attempt to make it possible for it to be convenient for the veteran.
Madam Chair, if I might, a 67% increase with no explanation whatsoever, which is far greater than what the Admission Act's original intent was, which was when a veteran lived too far, so that it was a more than 40-minute drive, then they would have access to community care. When there was difficulty getting an appointment, particularly for specialty care, which is no longer the case.
But let me say
Not for
to you
convenience,
that
not
the
for
wa-
convenience.
But the way it's currently structured is not, there are a lot of veterans who want more. That's all I'm telling you.
Well, then we should
from-
change the law, Madam Chair,
from what
because
I'm-
that's not the criteria in the Mission Act.
Okay,
If I may comment.
thank you very much. Certainly.
In my state, a 40-minute drive, nobody would qualify.
Right. Thank you, Judge. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so very much for explaining the issues around veteran suicide. I have met with several family members in my own district where it's heartbreaking, right? And I think that the idea that we are going to eliminate this protection just highlights the fact that we are ignoring that we owe an obligation to our veterans regardless of how we got here, right? That, you know, I often say that we can't just thank veterans for their service. We say that all the time. It means absolutely nothing if we don't provide them with the services they have earned. And over the weekend, you know, Trump unconstitutionally bombed Iran. Now, there are consequences from that will flow for decades to come. As we know, Bush entered into a war that lasted for years, that cost $728 billion. He claimed, similar to this, that Iraq then had weapons of mass destruction. It took the lives of 4,000 veterans. We now have 4.2 million veterans post 9/11, right? And we owe them an obligation. And I want to thank both the judge and you for supporting the Democratic amendment to make sure we had the advance funding consistent with the PACT Act, right? That was the right thing that we did here. But earlier in this hearing, it was suggested that the DOGE cuts were just cutting waste, that they weren't actually impacting services. Ranking Member Rossman Schultz, would you agree with that assessment?
No, and as I mentioned a short time ago, the cuts in staffing, you know, it's one thing if someone decided on their own to take an offer of retirement, but we're talking about widespread staffing cuts, unlawful staffing cuts that were, you know, appropriated by Congress, that have been halted in some cases by lawsuits where judges have determined that they were unlawful, particularly with probationary employees who, you know, didn't have due process. So these indiscriminate, random, significant firings at the VA with 80,000 plus more to come, because, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just not willing to go on the word of a secretary in an agency who has provided zero transparency for their decision-making. You know, trust me, we're not going to fire the 80,000 that they said publicly that they were planning to. That we have a system of checks and balances, Congresswoman, that the Founding Fathers created so that the Congress, with the Appropriations Authority in Article 1, have the ability to say, in this bill, we want a spending plan. We want an explanation. We want transparency on those cuts, and you do not have authorization to impound funds that Congress previously appropriated for these employees to provide services. And there's no chance, excuse me, excuse me, there's no chance if they fire 80,000 people that it's not going to cut into veterans' health care. No chance.
Yeah, so I'll let you, I'll ask a question, Stephen, okay? I've been out in my communities. I have a very large rural district, as, many on this committee, although I'm the Democrat with a very large rural district. And people are already worried because they're not getting their calls answered. They're not getting their reimbursements paid. They are already suffering from the cuts that have already happened.
Yes.
So it is right to sound the alarm. And I think it's important that Congress act. We have power. It's only a question of whether we are willing to exercise it. And if you're not willing to exercise it, then you're not carrying out your constitutional obligation to your own constituents. And when somebody, when they say, well, it's cutting fraud, What I'm really worried about was GOP declares war on the government accounting office. If we really cared about fraud and waste, we would not then be seeking to cut the agency that wants to get rid of in a careful manner that will look on a bipartisan, not actually nonpartisan, anybody who asks them a question, is there anything else? This is how you look at fraud and waste, not by just saying, let's get rid of 83,000 people without any kind of consideration by firing people.
What I perceive, having been the ranking member or the chair of this subcommittee for many years, is that with the allowing of DOJ to rummage around in veterans' private data and information, personal private security information, with the mass firings that have taken place with no accountability and impoundment of funds, canceling of contracts, saying they're going to transfer hundreds of millions of dollars without congressional oversight or approval. This is all designed to break VA from within so that they can ultimately point out, because of the length of time that this will cause people to have to wait for services and appointments and the benefits that they're receiving, and then later on down the road, they can the majority can point to the problems that VA has because they've caused them on purpose to say, see, VA doesn't work anymore. We need to just send even more money into community care and eventually shift where veterans get their care and their services to the private sector. That's unacceptable. It would gravely harm our veterans, and we have to stand in the breach and not allow it.
Right, and veterans want to be seen at the veterans facility based on Trump from his first time in office. They had proposed cutting community-based CBOCs, community-based clinics, and saying, well, that's all right, they'll just get care in the community. The reality is there is oftentimes no care in the community, and the veterans clinics provide a care that would otherwise not be available, and they want to be seen by people who are also veterans. So it is clear that veterans want to have a VA. They want a VA that works, though. And so, yes, it needs fixing, but you don't fix it by just firing everybody and terminating people and saying we don't have the courage to stand up to the
overwhelming
administration.
majority of veterans have said in surveys that they prefer care at the VA.
Right. So if you really cared about veterans, you'd stand up for the VA. I wanted to ask about the impact on women veterans in this bill. It denies our women veterans equal access to care and to information that helps them make their best choices for them, right? And it really should be that when somebody signs up for the military, it shouldn't matter their zip code, what kind of care they can get. I mean, how concerned are you? And you mentioned it earlier, but I think we should point it out again. Do you feel that this bill with the writers discriminates against women veterans?
Yes. While the funding for women's health care, is still separate and fully funded, the limitations on access to care for women, particularly access to abortion care, other health care services, the challenges of IVF access, it is of grave concern to me that we aren't ensuring that there is equal access to the largest growing population of veterans served at the fastest growing population of veterans served at the VA for their health care, which is women veterans.
Right. So it's not right to say, come serve and protect our freedoms, but then we are going to restrict your freedoms with regards to reproductive health care, whether it be abortion or seeking to have a family through IVF. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
I'm also very concerned about the fact that we are cutting what we need for resiliency in this time when we actually need more, given the threats that we are in. But I think you've covered a little bit of that earlier, and so I'll forgo those questions. I am the last Democrat. Is there anything else you want to mention in response to any of the conversation?
No, I think we've covered it.
Thank you so very much, Chair and Judge, and thank you very much, Ranking Member. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question, Chairman Carter. I recently saw that the VA had successfully relaunched its electronic health records modernization effort, and as we both know, the current administration is rightly leaning into this technology effort and pushing to deploy more sites over the next 3 years. My understanding is that the new cloud-based system will replace VA's antiquated and cyber-vulnerable legacy system with a secure, standardized federal EHR, fully interoperable with DoD and community care providers. This will allow for seamless sharing of patient information. I think you would agree that our nation's veterans have waited far too long for DoD and VA to align on this issue. That is why I believe this administration is so committed to rolling the system out. In the bill before us, I see that the Appropriations Committee provided $2.5 billion to support the VA EHRM rollout, which is great, but it is short of the President's request of $3.5 billion. Mr. Chairman, can you share some of your rationale on the funding level? And do you see an opportunity to fully fund the President's FY26 request to help deliver this system sooner to more of our veterans?
Oh, well, we've been working on this since I came on the committee, which was in 2004. Okay? We've thrown billions of dollars at this problem. We've had every kind of strange, weird thing happen that you can imagine. I've asked the question about 100 times, where'd all that money go? We're now at we think we've got a viable program beginning to work, and we're looking forward to it moving much faster. That's why we continue to fund it. But I am a skeptic, as is my colleague, a skeptic, and as is every member of our subcommittee, a skeptic. And so we're watching those dollars like hen's teeth. They're very scarce. And we're saying, you better get it done, you better get it done right, and now's the time to start advancing. Where it works, it now works. The amazing thing about this whole thing is, when we finally get this technology done, it'll be awesome. That's how fast with AI, that's gonna make everything go boom. Don't ask me to explain that because I can't. All right, but we are watching and we're waiting for more information from the White House on this, if we need to do other things with this. But we are cautiously funding it to go forward, is the way I can basically say it. I am very skeptical that we've had 5 or 6 different firms that have worked on this. And some of them have even forgotten who they were. I mean, and on both sides, it's been the biggest wreck I've ever been involved in. I've been involved in some wrecks. Okay? But anyway, we're working on it, and we're watching it. And right now, it is working basically in Washington and Oregon and moving east. And that's why we're trying to get it going. But believe me, I watch this thing with a very skeptical eye, as does my colleague, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. We're very skeptical, but we don't want to stop and go build and start again, because when you stop and start again, it takes 2 to 5 years to see the results again, with billions and billions of dollars going out the door. It is a honeypot for somebody, and I don't know who they are. But anyway, I am watching it closely, as is Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wasserman Schultz, if you have any comments on that, would be great.
I would associate myself with the chairman's remarks. We have had in multiple administrations, both sides of the aisle, serious problems where these launches have had to be halted. There have been patient errors that have even caused death, serious injury. The interoperability has been challenging and not worked in some instances. So there have been long pauses and restarts. And so I think we're really of the same mind. Frustration, but interest in moving it forward because you have to have an interoperable system that crosses through DOD and travels with you all the way through your time at the VA. And then hopefully eventually can include the community care component, which isn't even close to a possibility now. But there's real serious risk if it isn't implemented the right way, and patient risk. So I think we're all interested in there being advancement, but cautiously so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Mr. Chairman, as always, you know, you were the freshman steering representative for your class, so too am I for my class. So always admire you and follow in your footsteps. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. Mr. Scott, do you have any questions? No questions. Well, I thank our witnesses for being here today, and with seeing no further questions, the panel is excused. Debbie. Now welcome our second panel, Representative Moore and Representative Scanlon from the Committee on the Judiciary. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Happy birthday, right? You had a birthday? Did you have a birthday recently? No, okay. Representative Moore, I welcome your testimony. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Today we consider two common sense pieces of legislation. First, a bill that makes aliens inadmissible and removable if they drive drunk. And second, a resolution that condemns the Los Angeles riots. Now, the average Americans passing this bill and this resolution will be a no-brainer. Even in this polarized time, Democrats should be able to join. Yes, ma'am. Even in this polarized time, Democrats should be able to join Republicans unanimously and support reasonable legislation. After all, deporting dangerous criminals and condemning dangerous riots are rational, normal, and coherent steps this House should take. Unfortunately, I'm skeptical that we will see much agreement from my Democrat colleagues on these measures. Regardless, I am thankful to this committee for considering the Jeremy and Angel Seay and Sergeant Brendan Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act, a bill I introduced last Congress and again this Congress. Every 45 minutes, that is how often someone in the United States dies in a crash involving alcohol-impaired driving. In 2022 alone, there were 13,524 alcohol-impaired driving fatalities. In 2020, drunk drivers caused enough crashes that led to 400,000 injuries in this country. Those crashes don't discriminate. The victim could be me, it could be you, it could be someone, anyone in our families or communities. This issue hits home to me. And there was a newlywed couple from my hometown in Enterprise, Alabama, named Angel and Jeremy Seay, and I knew this couple personally. Angel and Jeremy were riding a motorcycle together when out of nowhere, an illegal alien under the influence of alcohol collided into the newlyweds with his pickup. Their lives were cut short in this senseless act. Tragedies like this are not uncommon across our country. In December of 2023, an illegal alien killed a 46-year-old woman and her 16-year-old son in Bloomfield, Colorado, when he drove his truck up to 100 miles an hour and ran into the victim's vehicle, causing it then to crash into a tree. Despite having 5 previous DUI-related convictions, a Boulder County judge sentenced this illegal alien to probation and community service and work release on December 8, 2023, in relation to 2 of those convictions. Just 4 days later, the drunk driver crashed and killed the mother and her son. Or consider the case in Florida, where just earlier this year, an illegal alien from Mexico was arrested for his 3rd DUI after he hit and killed a kindergartner. In Texas, in December of 2024, an illegal alien killed a 7-year-old girl after he drove drunk, crashed into a car that was being driven by the girl's mother. Just months earlier, under the Biden-Harris administration, ICE had lifted a detainer which had previously been lodged against this illegal alien after he was arrested for assaulting a family member in June of 2024. H.R. 875 makes common sense changes to immigration laws to make an alien who is convicted or admits to drinking and driving under the influence inadmissible. It also makes an alien convicted of doing so removable. In fact, 59 Democrats voted in favor of this legislation when I brought it to the House and the floor last February. If you're a guest in this country, you drive drunk, you should be removed from our country, period. Drunk drivers are involved in 31% of all crashes that cause death in this country. On average, drunk driving killed roughly 11,000 people in the United States every year from 2012 to 2022. Yet current immigration law does not make aliens inadmissible or removable if they drive drunk and recklessly break our laws. H.R. 875 changes that and creates safer streets and safer communities for all of us. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Today, we're also considering House Resolution 516, led by my colleague, Representative Young Kim. This resolution condemns the violent riots in Los Angeles, California. For weeks, we have seen violence spread in the streets of Los Angeles and beyond. Individuals have engaged in arson, looting, personal property destruction, vandalism, and assault of law enforcement officers. Meanwhile, the hardworking men and women at ICE have ensured that dangerous criminal aliens are removed from Los Angeles streets. In one operation, in May, ICE arrested aliens convicted of manslaughter, aggravated rape of a minor, and assault with a deadly weapon. The week the Los Angeles riots began, ICE arrested aliens with convictions for murder, burglary, battery, DUI, sexual battery, and grand theft. Yet apparently, all of that is a bridge too far for the far left. Under their logic, immigration laws should only be ignored, not enforced. The resolution expresses gratitude to law enforcement, including the LAPD, local sheriff's offices, and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This resolution is another piece of legislation that I hope all members can get behind, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues on the Rules Committee. I've served on the committee for 6 years now, but it's the first time I've been on this side of the dais. So as we all know, in particular, bills typically only come before the Rules Committee when they can't garner 2/3 of our members' votes on the House floor. So why don't these two Judiciary Committee bills have broad support across the whole House? Because they're legislative clickbait. They're designed to provoke heat, noise, and division, not a thoughtful policy discussion. Pretty succinctly, I'd sum them up as both missed opportunities and huge distractions. So first, let's talk about H.R. 875. The tragic fact is that we lose more than 11,000 people every year to crashes caused by drunk driving, and more than 1 million people are arrested every year for DUIs. The scourge of drunk driving is something that all of us want to stamp out once and for all, and we can take steps towards doing that at the federal level. We can support enforcement of laws on the books. We can put additional resources towards anti-drunk driving awareness and education. And we can support programs that work to end alcohol addiction. I know for a fact there's a bipartisan legislation out there ready to go. But those efforts haven't been moved under this majority. Instead, we're dealing with clickbait legislation. A few years ago, when Democrats led the House, we passed the HALT Drunk Driving Act that would provide more support for technology that could interface with vehicles and prevent drunk driving. That was signed into law as part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, even though almost every House Republican voted against it. Let's be clear. Anyone who commits a crime and endangers the public should be held accountable, and our existing laws reflect that. Serious DUI convictions are already grounds to deport or refuse admission to a non-citizen. Full stop. So this bill doesn't close any gap in existing law, and it doesn't make our country safer. It only weaponizes a problem to attack and scapegoat all immigrants. And it forgoes any nuance or circumstances which might call for a different result. I mean, as an example, just 3 months ago, the Speaker's own chief of staff was arrested for DUI when he crashed into a Capitol Police vehicle after President Trump's State of the Union address. Despite this incident, the Speaker said he has full faith and confidence in his staffer and believes he deserved a second chance. Yet he supports bringing this bill to the floor, which would deport a green card holder who may have lived here for decades for much less than that. In Arizona, sleeping in your car while drunk without even operating it or starting it can get you a misdemeanor DUI, and that would make someone deportable under this bill. Instead of confronting the dangers of drunk driving with serious public policy changes and resources, our Republican colleagues have brought us an unworkable proposal that doesn't address a very real problem on our roads, because the problem they're trying to solve is overwhelmingly about citizen drivers. I participated in the judiciary hearings that led to this bill being sent to the floor, and I carefully reviewed the majority report. There's absolutely no evidence in that hearing or report showing a causal connection between immigration status and drunk driving. And most notably, for all this talk, this legislation takes no real meaningful action to repair our broken immigration system. Now, HRES 516 presents similar problems. Instead of uniting people to condemn violence and draw the really important distinction between peaceful protest and lawless violence, our Republican colleagues have instead written up a largely fact-free and partisan resolution designed to score political points and sow division rather than reaffirming Central American values. So first of all, the people of Los Angeles, just like anywhere else in this country, have a right to peacefully protest government actions. Because in case anyone's forgotten, that is an American right enshrined in our First Amendment. And unbiased reporting has been clear that the recent protests in LA were limited in scope and overwhelmingly peaceful, despite what we've heard and what I'm sure we'll continue to hear. Any instances of actual criminal conduct that happened in the backdrop of these events were swiftly denounced by California's leaders, they were handled by local law enforcement, and they're being punished by the letter of the law. State and city officials took steps to keep people safe, and local law enforcement has been clear that they did not feel the need to request that Governor Newsom mobilize the National Guard. Instead, what we did see was this administration set out to provoke confrontation and cause chaos. They began by conducting aggressive, rush-hour ICE raids designed to garner maximum TV coverage, featuring masked and armed agents and armored vehicles, which they then used to snatch loved ones and friends from their jobs. And while they didn't see fit to provide notice to local law enforcement, they did provide advance notice to a TV personality, Dr. Phil, and it allowed him to embed with ICE both before and after the raids and get exclusive interviews with the border czar. So this was followed by deploying U.S. troops onto our country's streets, with the president's agents proclaiming that they'd arrest California's duly elected governor and announcing that they wanted to liberate Los Angeles, an American city. It's the stuff of dictators and authoritarians, not U.S. leaders. And it demonstrably inflamed tensions and made law enforcement's job harder. Let's be clear, we all condemn political violence, and those who cross the line from protected speech and protected protest to violence should be held accountable. But the administration and this resolution are misrepresenting the obvious difference between mass protest and isolated acts of violence in a shameless attempt to distract from what people were actually protesting about to begin with. Because it's clear that the people in Los Angeles and across the country don't believe that this administration's efforts to terrorize communities with menacing police actions are good for them or good for America. People took to the streets in Los Angeles and elsewhere to make their voices heard because they know that this type of menacing law enforcement does not make our communities safer. When masked agents grab not hardened criminals, but hardworking people with no criminal past from their workplaces and neighborhoods and schools, they know that it doesn't make us safer when government rips people away from their children and disappears them to gulags in El Salvador based on tattoos and mistaken identities and just plain mistakes. And they know that it doesn't make us safer when the president forcibly deploys the military on U.S. soil to engineer a politically charged visual display. And perhaps most Orwellian of all, it doesn't make us safer when people are grabbed when they appear in court to make their cases for why they are entitled under our law to be here legally. So no resolution is going to distract from that. With both these bills, it's clear that House Republicans want to hide behind manufactured anger and division. They know that they've done nothing to keep their campaign promises about driving down costs for families, making our country safer, or making people's lives better. In fact, it's the very opposite. The 6 months of this administration have been a train wreck, and the chaos continues every day at the expense of American families and our national security. So we know they don't want to talk about this, so we end up with these crazy bills in front of us. And obviously, I oppose them. My Democratic colleagues on the Judiciary Committee oppose them, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ms. Fishbach for her time of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just have a couple of comments sincerely, and I appreciate you bringing these bills forward, Mr. Moore. And, first of all, DUI is a serious offense. It is serious. And my family has been touched twice by folks who have been under the influence, and there's been a car crash. So my family has been on the receiving end of that. So I appreciate that you brought that forward because it is a serious offense, and we need to deal with it. And if people are here as guests, we should not be tolerating it. And as for the resolution regarding this underlines the Republicans' support for law and order, and it's an important thing. I'm from Minneapolis, or excuse me, I'm not from Minneapolis, from Minnesota, where we had the Minneapolis issues, and they've already done 32 million. Am I remember in California, already done $32 million worth of damage in California. And we just have to make sure that we are supporting law and order, because these aren't peaceful protests. These aren't mostly peaceful. These aren't people taking to the streets. They're taking to the streets to do damage. They're not just trying to have their voices heard. There are serious issues going on, and serious damage and rioting, and that happened in Minneapolis, and now it's happening across the country. And so I appreciate you bringing this forward so that we can once again underline our support for law and order. So thank you very much, Mr. Moore, and I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ms. Leisure Fernandez for her time of questioning.
Thank you very much, and how nice to see each of you, and you look great on the other side of the table. So, we've seen Trump's playbook before from all kinds of authoritarian and dictators across the globe and across the centuries. A nation reeling from economic hardship and trauma of a global crisis. A leader rises and claims he will take the country back to a glorified past. Instead of lowering grocery bills or raising wages, he finds a group to blame for all the economic problems. Over the years, over the centuries, we've seen the group be Christians or Jews or LGBTQ, and it changes who the group is, but not the playbook. We see sometimes a leader come in a democratic fashion and then demonize the press, undermine the court, silence dissent. We often see wasteful military parades, and often war. Americans are upset at the cost of groceries, the way corporations have too much power, how the rich keep getting richer, and the regular folk struggle. They want to be able to afford to buy a home of their own, to get quality health care, and to see their children have a more prosperous future than they had. Rather than pursue bills to address the cost of living crisis or help Americans achieve that dream of prosperity, Trump and the MAGA Republicans have declared immigrants the cause of all of our problems. Republicans are falling over themselves to introduce and pass bills to show how hard they are on immigrants, even if those bills are just restatements of existing laws, like Representative Moore's bill. Seriously, we agree. Serious DUIs should be deportable offenses. Guess what? Serious DUIs are deportable offenses. When Republicans go home and your voters confront you about closing down rural hospitals, you can tell them, oh, but don't worry. Look at how I beat up on immigrants. I passed a bill to pass a law that is already a law. Democrats know the immigration system is broken, which is why we've introduced, when we were in power, numerous bipartisan immigration bills to address the need for agricultural workers, to provide dreamers a legal pathway, and to strengthen our security in our borders. We're not seeing the same on this end. And in fact, you raised it, Representative Scanlon, when you talked about the concerns about due process and the number of people who are being rounded up without any due process, including legal residents and citizens. Now, I don't sit on a judiciary board or any of your judiciary colleagues concerned about this lack of due process.
Well, that's been an ongoing concern as we parse through these bills that target immigrants, that very often, actually in virtually every case, the conduct that is being targeted, at least in terms of public relations, are things that are already deportable offenses. The issue becomes whether or not there's due process engaged in terms of ascertaining, first of all, whether someone is a citizen or not, whether someone's legally here in the country or not, whether they are actually a criminal or not. That's what due process is about. Otherwise, we end up deporting citizens. We end up holding people liable for things that they didn't do.
Right. And I think everybody is in agreement that anybody who engages in criminal conduct, whether it's a protester, whether it's a citizen, or whether it's an immigrant, they need to face the consequences. And so going after criminal conduct is a fair thing to do. But Representative Moore, how many people detained by ICE under the Trump administration do not have a criminal background? You don't know? Well, according to the Cato Institute, as of June 14th, ICE had booked into detention 204,297 individuals. Of those bookings, 65%, 133,687 individuals had no criminal conviction. So we are not going after, right now, ICE is not going after criminals. As you pointed out, Representative Scanlon, they're picking them up when they're going in for their appointments. You don't show up at your appointment if you've been engaged in criminal activity. You are actually following the law, and they're being picked up. And, you know, I think that that's part of the problem. And the other part of the problem is the way, and this is why we have people protesting, which is a First Amendment right. Right? We had 12 million people protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights on the No Kings rallies. 12 million people. If they would have all been violent, we'd have no cities left. And they were protesting in Idaho, they were protesting in Utah, they were protesting in red states and blue states. But part of the problem is when you divert ICE's attention is that you are diverting resources that should be going to attack and to address criminal conduct. One of the things I'm very concerned about is just that. Mr. Chair, I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record the article titled Exclusive, Thousands of Agents Diverted to Trump Immigration Crackdown. Oh, I am sorry. The source of that is Reuters.com. The Reuters, March 22nd, 2025.
All right. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you for the clarification. But from the article, it says the DEA, Drug Enforcement, whose roughly 10,000 staff had led the nation's efforts to battle drug cartels, has shifted about a quarter of its work to these immigration operations. That's a lot of people who should be going after drug lords and drug cartels and stopping the flow of fentanyl, picking up people when they go for their immigration hearings picking up and raiding our fields where people are picking the food to serve us. That is not making our country more safe. It is putting us more at risk. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Ranking Member Scanlon?
Yes, thank you, I appreciate it. I may have looked surprised when the gentlelady mentioned a figure for damage in Los Angeles, and that was because I hadn't heard it, but we did look it up, and in fact, the figure that she cited was not for damage. It was the cost for pulling out law enforcement in order to address the protests that had occurred in Los Angeles, and the figure probably isn't surprising because the governor and mayor warned the president that if he were to call out the military, that it would inflame the situation and cause more protests. And in fact, that's what we saw. In the days after that happened, protests spiked. They have since receded. So the figure that was offered was not for damage to the city, but it was for the costs of law enforcement and cleanup associated with the protests. Figure that wasn't mentioned was the $139 million that it's costing to deploy the National Guard. And in fact, the National Guard have not been involved in controlling the protests. So yes, there are costs here, but they are not as represented. And that's, all going to the fact that there was a plan in place for civil unrest in Los Angeles. They have used their plans many times before. They did not feel the need for it. And in fact, calling out the military here has added hundreds of millions of dollars of costs to the city.
So $134 million in order to have a performance of we are sending in the National Guard. We are militarizing our streets, which George Washington said was the last thing you should do is do not ever use our military against our own citizens. It's costing us $134 million, and I don't know if people have seen this, but a lot of those poor National Guard, they were just sleeping, right? They were sleeping on, like they were when they had to come here. The difference is, when they came here, there had been violent clashes, and our own Capitol Police had been beaten. And we needed the National Guard here. We called for them. We wanted them here. Real different in LA when they had sufficient force to handle everything.
Well, there's also the continuing cost because the National Guard, these are folks from the community. Many of them are law enforcement agents elsewhere in the state of California. And the duties that they usually participate in there include things like managing wildfires, which of course California has been particularly afflicted with over the last year, and working on drug law enforcement at the border. So these folks were actually pulled off the border into performative roles in LA. So there's not just the cost of maintaining them in LA to essentially be a backdrop for media hits or something, but then there's the cost of them not being able to do the jobs that they would ordinarily do and pulling them out of their home communities.
Right, and before I yield back, I just want to point out that it is the Republicans who refused to put up the plaque honoring the law enforcement officers who protected us on January 6th, even though it is the law. Republicans refused to honor the Capitol Police and other law enforcement officers who protected us from rioters and insurrectionists who were causing a lot of damage. We all lived through it. We should honor them. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Now recognize myself for time of questioning. Mr. Moore, we heard all kinds of things that don't think anything to do with 875, but that bill actually requires for deportation a conviction, so due process is all in place. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. And it requires it, actually, I have a concerning, it actually requires that the way the judge goes through the process, he uses the same laws that they've used for years to determine if, in fact, it is a crime. And, of course, The DUI part of it is the conviction itself, right, the due process. And so they get a due process going through it, and so it's one of those where they just go through, and it's the normal court hearing. But if you look at it, it's 80 years the Board of Immigration and Appeals has provided additional protections for aliens who removability or inadmissibility is based on admission. So under the BIA precedent, to be considered an admission, an alien's admission must be explicit, unequivocal, and unqualified. Even then, the immigration judge would still have to find the admission fits within jurisdictions relevant to DUI and DUI-related statutes, and that the admission is based on reasonable, substantial, and probative evidence. And so it should not be so difficult to remove a foreign national drunk driver from the U.S. to ensure that they cannot enter the U.S. in the first place. This contradiction kind of it's really fear-mongering. It contradicts the law, it contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that the aliens who drive drunk can be removed from the United States. So they get a normal due process.
Can I just add, they don't require a conviction, though, for the
Admissibility.
inadmissibility, yeah.
Right. For admission into the country, it can be based on an admission of facts that would, taken on the admission of facts, equal to driving under the influence charge. But for deportability, which is what I asked about, it is a conviction. All right. I appreciate that. With that said, I will. Oh, sure. I'll yield you some time.
Okay,
Sure.
were you done? I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to respond a little bit. Yes, I talked about 32 million, but as I, just spend a couple of minutes on the internet, they actually estimated at potentially over 52 billion. Because they're talking about the property damage, they're talking about the cleanup. But, I think that the 2,000 buildings that were damaged by fire are significant. The 23, now this, I can imagine there was probably more, but at least 23 businesses that were looted and potentially burned. So, so we can argue over the numbers, but the fact is that there's serious issues going on. And I think probably those 23 business owners that were being looted, or at least 23, were probably appreciative of the fact that additional law enforcement and members of the military were sent in to stop that kind of thing, so that maybe it stopped at 23 instead of 123. So I just wanted to point that out, that yes, maybe we had numbers wrong, but the property damage is significant.
And I
yield
assume the
back.
gentlelady also was concerned, or perhaps included in that number, were all the businesses that had to shut down because of the disruption in that part of the city.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
All
Chair.
right. With that, I yield back and now recognize the gentleman.
I'm sure that everything has already been asked, so I'll yield back.
I've got very few questions. Barry, Congressman Moore, thank you for putting this up. What you hear back and forth from my good friends on the other side, I don't know if pictures lie or not. Burning cars have a price. Broken windows have a price. Breaking and looting buildings, businesses have a price. That doesn't lie. And to say that it does is peaceful protest, it's just not true. Then pictures don't tell a different story. It's a shame we have to have this. Los Angeles do not have a strict punishment or consequences for it, and that's why you have all this. To think that you send in police and it inflames people is really laughable.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said it was sending in the military that inflamed people. It wasn't the police.
Inflames the people. Send in the military to keep order, from buildings being burned, from people, ICE officers getting beat up,
You think
from businesses
people of
getting
Rock Hill
looted.
would enjoy
That's
it if the military hit the streets
Can I
of
just
your
finish?
hometown?
Can I just finish? Then I'll let you, I'm not going to interrupt
It
you.
is the gentleman's time.
I'll be glad to, but they can't, no one can hear. Maybe they don't want to listen, but to say that police, National Guard, military being called in flames, And that's why they tear up buildings, loot buildings, break windows, tear up cars. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, what are you saying?
I'm saying that as the governor and the mayor indicated, they were capable of handling whatever looting or whatever had happened in connection with these ICE raids, but that the announcement that the president was going to send in the military did inflame folks and cause more protests. And if people do things that are out of hand when they come in protest, then their police were able to handle it. But the issue was that the president exacerbated the situation here. It's basically a 10th Amendment question. I mean, going back to the founding of our country, police power is reserved to our states and to our local agencies, and people don't take it well if someone tries to impose the military on their streets.
I think the governor's record is pretty clear on the free-for-all that he allows in California. How that man stays in office, I have no idea. He has, unfortunately. Unfortunately for the people of California. Mr. Moore, you have any comments on?
You know, sir, I saw the videos you saw, the police officers, the cinder blocks through the windows, the police officers being hit with cinder blocks. They needed backup. And I think that to restore order, a lot of the flags I saw were not American flags being waved in California. And so I think the president acted duly. He brought in the National Guard, and he got the situation under control. The figure I saw was $20 million on damages, but we saw immigrants who actually had businesses who were being knocked down, their businesses being raided, and so the cost of that, the loss of business, the revenue to that community is going to be, and all of that, the security issues. Just people will be afraid to go to those areas until order is restored. So I think the president did the right thing.
He absolutely did the right thing. And police officers can't patrol. This didn't go over. The looters didn't just do this for 10, 11 hours. They did it days. And the only reason the governor did not want help, he hates Donald Trump so much. Donald Trump helped out the people when a governor does not.
You remember President Trump reached out and asked him to get it under control, and then Newsom denied he ever made the call. And so I think President Trump reacted the way he had to, and it just restored order to the community. His job is to protect the people, and sometimes that requires the National Guard.
And to say the costs were associated with the National Guard and not with the damage the looting went on defies any type of logic that I've ever witnessed. Anyway, thank you for putting this
Yes, sir.
up.
Now recognize
Just
the
briefly.
gentleman from, the ranking member,
yeah.
Massachusetts, gentleman from Massachusetts for
Yeah,
a
just
couple of
briefly, I wish the president had done the right thing on January 6th. I was here that day. I don't know if you saw the videotapes of what happened that day. I didn't know if you want to see pictures of broken windows and destroyed property. And when all is said and done, not only did the president not do the right thing, but when he got the chance, he pardoned everybody. And you talk about flags that were being waved, there were Confederate flags being waved that day. No one seemed to have any problem with that. And so and we can't even get the Speaker of the House to hang the plaque that Congress voted on to honor the men and women of the police force, not only of the Capitol, but all the area police forces who actually protected us that day. So I find this kind of selective outrage, a little bit startling. All of us condemn violence wherever it occurs, and looting and any kind of illegal activity. I think the issue in California was that the area of protest was contained. There were far more people protesting peacefully than violently, and so I find this selective outrage that and nobody has said a word about the pardoning of all those who did destruction to this building and who beat up our police. Yeah, if you want to ask.
Mr. Governor, I think if I remember correctly, President Trump offered to bring the guard, and Pelosi turned it down, right?
Well, he didn't, and so he did not. And we all know that. That's the new spin.
Well, that's what
But
we
did
were
President
told.
Trump pardon everybody?
I guess he did.
Yes, he did. I don't
think he
know.
did.
I could give you the news articles if you don't know. He did. People who violently attacked men and women of law enforcement up here, who were protecting the lives of every member that was in serving then and all the staff up here. Yeah, he pardoned every one of them.
Will you yield, Mr.
I'm
Governor?
happy to yield to the gentleman so he can defend the indefensible.
Gentleman yields to the gentleman.
Good luck, Ralph.
Are you denying, are you,
North Carolina.
Pardon me?
I yielded to you, he yielded
I
to you.
yielded to you.
Okay. Are you denying that President Trump is on record that he called for the National Guard, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let him come in?
That.
That's not selective outrage,
That's
Mr.
not what
Governor.
happened. But are you denying that the President Trump pardoned every single one of these people that came up here and violently attacked law enforcement?
If you want to get into pardons, let's get into your President McGovern, your
Yeah,
president.
can I just ask you one other question? Who's in charge of the National Guard? Nancy Pelosi or the President of the United States? The President of the United States overrode the governor in California and sent in the National Guard. So the idea that you're blaming Nancy Pelosi, this rewriting of history is absurd. It's a way to cover up what, this
You
terrible
can't cover up the facts, Mr. McGovern.
No, and the facts are that this Capitol was violently attacked
All right.
by a bunch of insurrectionists, and the President
Time
pardoned
belongs-
every single one of them.
Time belongs to the ranking member at this moment. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, the hypocrisy here is stunning to me. I yield back.
Can I say one last thing?
Gentleman has yielded back. I'm now going to recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack. He might yield you some time.
Yeah, of course, I'll yield to you, Mr. Norman, please.
Thank you, Ms. Jack. I'll just say what was televised for I don't know how many weeks, Mr. McGovern, when Nancy Pelosi wouldn't get cross-examined. She wouldn't call the Sergeant of Arms up. She kicked Jim Jordan, and I think.
And when was she in charge of the National Guard?
I'm talking about the trial. I'm talking about, you can say President didn't ask for the National
President
Guard
didn't
in,
do a
but
damn
on the
thing
trial,
to help
no,
us.
y'all hate, look,
And he pardoned them all.
President Trump asked it would have been avoided. He would have had the people there and stopped all of that had it happened. It didn't happen. On the trial that was a charade, they to kick off all the Republicans, Jim Jordan and I forget one other one, Jim Banks. It was a sham trial. And why didn't Nancy Pelosi have to testify? Why didn't the Sergeant of Arms have to testify? It was a sham because they hate Donald Trump so bad.
What trial?
Those are questions that need to be asked
I
of
yield
the
back.
chair. We try not to have debate between the various members. And I don't have the answer to those questions, and it's Mr. Jack's time.
And maybe we
Mr.
could
Jack
submit
wants to yield-
a written request that maybe we could ask why Donald Trump didn't testify.
Okay.
It-
Well,
Mr. Jack.
I will, I just want to ask Mr. Moore one question before I yield back, and obviously welcome any conversation as it relates to this bill. Specifically, Mr. Moore, I understand that over the course of a 10-year period, I believe this bill will actually be a cost saver for our government. It'll save about $500,000. That's been the estimate. Wanted to see if you had any comment on that.
I don't have the cost savings in front of me, Mr. Jack, but I'm happy to get that to you.
Wonderful. If you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that this bill will save about $500,000. That's, yes, sir.
Brian, I think it'll save a lot of lives. Many of these cases are released 4 or 5 times, like, Jeremy Seay in my district where he was killed. And time again, we see they'll downgrade these charges sometimes if we're not careful and call it a reckless driving. But the folks are back out on the street. In many cases, Mothers Against Drunk Driving says you've driven at least a dozen times drunk. And so they will a lot of times be deported or removed after they kill somebody. But at that point, it's too late for our communities and our families.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moore and Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Jack yields back, and that concludes our questioning. We appreciate the witnesses being here, and thank you so much for your testimony today. All right, I now welcome our third panel of the day, Representative Green and Representative Correa from the Committee on Homeland Security. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Representative Green, you are now recognized for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. I'm here today to speak in favor of my bill, the Special Interest Alien Reporting Act of 2025, an essential piece of border security transparency legislation. My bill would require the Department of Homeland Security to publicly release monthly reports on the number of special interest aliens encountered, their countries of origin, and where they were encountered. A special interest alien, or SIA, is a non-U.S. person who, based on a DHS analysis of travel patterns, may pose a national security risk to the United States or its interest. Currently, DHS does not report on this data. Instead, we have been left only with random, incomplete announcements of moment-in-time numbers by DHS officials or leaks to the media. The Biden-Harris administration's disastrous policies place the United States in an extremely vulnerable national security position. Over the past 4 years, Customs and Border Protection faced an unprecedented number of special interest aliens from 26 countries that the Department of Homeland Security has determined pose the greatest national security and counterintelligence threats. Those encountered included individuals from adversarial nations, including the People's Republic of China, Iran, Afghanistan, and Syria. The Biden-Harris administration intentional disregard for our laws and breakdown of national security resulted in U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountering over 1.7 million special interest aliens, a staggering number. Many of these individuals were swiftly processed and released into the interior under the Biden-Harris administration's catch and release policies. Given ongoing events in the Middle East, this legislation is essential for Congress to conduct congressional oversight of the executive branch. Given the fact that we have been warned of a potential attack on our homeland by Iran or their terrorist proxies, mean that American people should have transparency of special interest aliens coming across our border or who did come across our border the last 4 years. During the Biden-Harris administration, the Border Patrol apprehended over 1,500 Iranian nationals illegally crossing the southwest border between ports of entry. Of those, Biden and Harris admitted 729, that's almost half of those from Iran, into the United States. And we have no idea how many are still at large today. And guess what? We only just now are getting that number because CBP just disclosed it to Fox News' Bill Malugin, who posted it on his social media. That's not how this should work. With Iran threatening Americans with retaliatory attacks on our homeland, President Biden and Vice President Harris, his border czar, created an opportunity for our adversaries to gain access to our nation and wreak havoc when called upon. The Biden-Harris administration welcomed these potential national security risks into our country, including through illegal parole programs they started, such as the CBP One app, to facilitate their quick release into the United States. Parents don't let bad guys or potentially bad guys into their homes with their children. These people should have never been released into our country. Under Biden and Harris, our sovereign borders became revolving doors for illegal aliens, including an untold number of bad actors intent on causing mayhem and harm to innocent people. CBP already publicly reports statistics relating to individuals on the terrorist screening data set who attempt to illegally cross our borders, but they do not release statistics on special interest aliens. The American people deserve to see the data. Similar to the information on the terrorist screening data set, releasing encounter statistics on special interest aliens would not include sensitive information, but general encounter information, which increases the transparency and accountability that are critical to the health of our constitutional republic. After all, it's the American people that pay for the government because they're the taxpayers. They deserve to know. The legislation would show the American people the contrast between open borders and secure borders. It would require DHS to publish the monthly SIA numbers going all the way back to early 2021 when Biden and Harris took office. They will also provide Congress with necessary context to conduct oversight of future administrations. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this important piece of legislation to increase our national security and transparency for the American people whom we all swore an oath to serve and protect. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. You are now recognized for your 5-minute opening statement.
Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member of the Governor and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Tipping Off Terrorist Act. Although well-intentioned, this bill compromises national security. It's the bottom line. This bill requires Custom and Border Protection, CBP, to publish sensitive data on national security information on a monthly basis, essentially giving the bad guys information to do a better job of penetrating our defenses. But let's look at the big picture. Special Interest Alien, or SIA, just means that someone's travel patterns indicate a need for further scrutiny. It does not mean someone's a terrorist or out to do harm at all. During their committee markup, my colleagues on the Republican side claimed that this bill only required CBP to publish the total number of SIAs that are encountered while trying to enter the country illegally. If that were the case, I would support this legislation. But that is not the case. Greater transparency and accountability, Department of Homeland Security is important. Public needs it, but it should not be done at the expense of compromising our national security, which is exactly what this bill does. As the bill reads, it would also require CBP to publicly identify each SIA nationality, country of last residence, and the geographic location that the encounter was made, and whether the encounter was made at a port of entry or in the interior of the United States. By publishing this information in real time, bad actors will be able to tell who is getting advanced screening from CBP and which locations have been most successful in interdicting these immigrants. The bad guys will use this information to adjust their operations to try and avoid extra screening, which only hurts our national security. And please note that DHS has never publicly released these numbers on a real-time basis because the numbers could give away sensitive information. And please note today, there is nothing to stop DHS or Secretary Noem from publishing these numbers. Instead of addressing this bill on the floor, I asked the author of this legislation to work with DHS to get such information published or made available to the public in a way that DHS considers safe. I would ask the author of this bill to talk to the Secretary of Homeland Security and come up with a structure to publish this information that DHS would not deem harmful to our national security. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Fishbach for her time of questioning. She has no questions. Now recognize Ranking Member McGovern for his time of questioning.
Yeah, Ms. Green, it's my understanding that DHS can already release all the information that your bill is going to release. I mean, have you talked to Donald Trump? Have you talked to Kristi Noem? Why aren't they releasing it?
What my bill would do is provide transparency for the American people on the DHS website. They would.
Right, but they can do that already. They don't need a bill to do it. I mean, and last time I checked, Joe Biden's no longer president. Alejandro Mayorkas is no longer the head of DHS. All the people that you support are in power. Why don't they do it?
Well, under the Biden administration, the Border Patrol Chief, Michael W. Banks, was trying to release this information.
Yeah, but that's not the
They
question.
put this post out here.
That's not the question.
Because the American people deserve to know how many special interest aliens that the
Well,
Biden-Harris administration let into the country.
Why won't Secretary
Because the American
Noem-
people deserve to know.
No, but why won't, I mean, have you talked to the Secretary Noem?
I'm here with a bill. I would
I-
expect for you to vote for this. We're in danger now with a potential war that has been erupting this weekend. I would imagine this is important information. You would want your constituents to know.
I'm just asking a simple question, and that is that, given the fact that, you know, the people that you want in power are in power, they can do this on their own. They don't need a bill to pass to do it. There must be some reason why Secretary Noem and Donald Trump are not doing this already. I mean, you know, maybe it's because they're concerned about some unintended consequences about sensitive information being put out there in public, and it might adversely impact other things that they're doing to protect the security of the American people. But my question was, like, why aren't they doing it?
Well, Mr. McGovern, if you want to direct them to do that, then I'll be happy that you'll be voting for my bill.
No, I mean, they can already do it, and they're not. And so that's number one. That should be an alarm bell for everybody here. But while I have you here, you know, you know, what you had announced that you didn't know about the section in the budget reconciliation bill dealing with AI, and basically saying that states had no control over putting any regulations in place regarding AI for 10 years. That was in the budget reconciliation bill. And you said, and you tweeted, you said, I am adamantly opposed to this, and it is a violation of states' rights, and I would have voted no if I had known that this bill was in there. I actually agree with you that I think this is a terrible thing to do. In the Rules Committee, before we voted on it, we actually had a mega hearing here, beginning at 1 in the morning, and we had a pretty robust debate on this provision. I even offered an amendment to strip it from the provision, but it failed. And then you tweeted, I would vote no on any bill that destroys state rights and lets AI run wild for the next 10 years. And again, I'm with you on that particular issue. Then I sent out a Dear Colleague, and it was hand-delivered to every office, about another vote we were having, which was basically a revote on the budget reconciliation bill. And I quoted Chairwoman Fox, who said, any member who has any regrets about his or her vote on the first bill has an opportunity to vote no on the rule. If the rule had gone down, you could have forced the Rules Committee to change the underlying bill to actually drop this provision. But you voted yes, you voted to advance it.
I also clearly stated I didn't know about that in the bill before the vote. So I've been very transparent
No,
about it.
but you had a chance
But
to
I'm
read-
glad that you agree with me on, I'm glad that you
had a-
agree with me on that, as well as agreeing that you would like Secretary Noem to release the data. So
you
I'll
had
be
a-
happy to have your vote on this bill
You had a
to
chance to
release the
revote.
numbers of
You had
special interest aliens
You had a
monthly.
chance to revote on the reconciliation bill, which contained the provision that you said you would vote
We get
no on.
another vote when that comes back from the Senate,
Well,
Mr.
no,
McGovern.
well, that's the issue, is that in the Senate now, apparently, this awful provision has survived the bird bath. So it looks like it will be in the bill that comes back to the House whenever that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the question is, did you really mean it when you said you were going to vote no on any bill? Because you voted yes twice on a bill that contained the...
It must be really conflicting for you
It
to
is.
agree with MTG. You've agreed
No.
with me twice.
No.
On the AI provision about protecting state rights, and you're agreeing with me on my bill here that these numbers
I
should be
agree with-
released
I-
by
I-
Secretary
I-
Noem.
I-
I understand that Democrats have a hard time agreeing with
No,
me because you've spent years attacking me, but the reality is
we have a
that we're
small-
in
we have
agreement
a
today.
small
So
room here.
I'm excited for your
we have a
vote
small-
on HR 275, so Secretary Noem can
we have a
release
small
these
room here.
numbers. She'll be happy to release them.
We have a small room here, you don't have to shout.
I'm not shouting.
Yeah, but I'm just simply saying that I guess we agree, I guess, in theory, on the fact that this AI provision is bad. The only difference is I actually voted against moving that bill forward twice, and you voted yes in favor of moving it forward twice.
Yeah,
And
again,
I
Mr.
I'm
McGovern,
just-
I've been very public about it, and I know it's hard for you to agree with
I
me
know,
because you
but
probably
I-
tell your donors bad things about me.
no,
But you're on record agreeing with MTG, so that's great. This is a big
no,
win
no,
today.
I just wish MTG would vote with me, and actually.
we
and
can,
actually-
on
and
the
actually
special
vote- and-
interest
and
aliens
actually-
bill.
And actually vote against the budget reconciliation bill that contained this terrible provision in it. But even, I mean, you said you didn't know it was in it the first time you voted for it, even though we had a public debate here in the Rules Committee, and then you had a chance to vote
I don't
against it a
watch the
second
Rules
time.
Committee. I'm
Well,
like
you
most
know,
Americans,
well, you're a member of
I
the
don't
House of
stay up all night.
Representatives, and
You
it's
guys
your-
are kind of
it's
crazy
a-
in here.
You're a member of the House of Representatives, and it's your job to know what you're voting on. I mean, I
Well,
don't think that's.
Mr.
I don't-
McGovern,
so-
you probably voted with Nancy Pelosi when she said, we got to pass it to read it and find out what's in it. So, that's on you, that's your party, but I'm glad you agreed with me today. Thanks.
So let me just get a straight answer. If on the Senate bill, if this is in the Senate bill, will you vote no on the Senate bill?
Well, I'm hoping they take it out. I don't, and I'll be real honest, I'm against a moratorium on state rights to regulate and make laws for their states
Right,
on AI.
right, yeah.
And
So
so
am I to take your tweet literally that you would vote no?
I'm hoping that Republicans take it out in the Senate.
but
I've
if
been
it-
very open and honest about it.
Yeah, right,
And
yeah.
we're not whipping votes today. So what we're
Well,
doing is we're actually trying to talk about telling the American
That-
people
that-
how many special interest aliens have come across the border. I mean, you supported the Biden-Harris administration, so you supported the release of these people. I can't imagine you would be against this bill.
So
You
that
want
took-
Secretary Noem to release this
I reclaim my
information.
time.
I don't know how you're against this
reclaim my
bill.
time.
Gentleman has reclaimed his
Yeah.
time.
So going back to the issue on the budget reconciliation, I assume that it's going to be business as usual, where we have Republicans get out and make strong statements, and then at the last minute cave. So I hope I'm proven wrong on that. On this bill that we're talking about right now, again, the thing I can't quite understand is that you have, I'm sure you have a good relationship with this Secretary Noem. You could pick up the phone and say, hey, do this. And I guess, and if you haven't had that conversation, maybe you have. And if you have, my question would be, why isn't she doing it?
I'm so excited to have your vote for this.
I think there's lots. I think even Secretary Noem, who I have strong disagreements with, and this administration know that it is dangerous, and it could actually damage the safety and well-being of people in this country and of other investigations if this stuff we're doing. So to be clear, I oppose your bill, but I'm just wondering why we're wasting our time bringing a bill to the floor that the administration could do on its own. Mr. Correa, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, sir. I would support this legislation. It was essentially just numbers and the aggregate are reported to the public. But when it comes to specifics, I would go to the Department of Homeland Security and go with a recommendation. Those are the guys that are playing defense for us, and they've done a pretty good job of stopping terrorist attacks in our country for a number of years. I'm not going to second guess them and start voting for legislation. They would say, break it down by specifics as to what's going on. And that's the argument
Did
here.
DHS come up and testify on this bill in your committee?
No, they did not.
Was there a hearing on this bill?
There was a hearing.
And DHS wasn't asked to come and testify?
They weren't there.
And is there a reason why DHS wasn't there? I'm just, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell you.
Sir, they're the experts, and I'd like to have them, really
Is
control
there a
this
rea-
legislation.
Ms. Green, is there a reason why DHS wasn't invited to testify? Or do we have an opinion from them on this? Is there
There's no specifics, information, no names, addresses, nothing specific identifying about the special interest alien coming into the country. Secretary Noem has come to our committee and appeared before our
So
committee.
has she formally endorsed this?
Secretary Noem has no problem releasing this information. Democrats are the
Why
only
doesn't-
ones
why doesn't she do it?
defending.
Well,
The
then
Democrats
why
are the
don't-
ones
if she
trying
has-
to protect special interest
If she has no
aliens.
problem doing it, she can do it.
Mr. McGovern, you're protecting, and
No,
Mr.
I'm
Correa are
just saying she can do
protecting
it.
special interest aliens.
She can do it. She has the power to do it.
Then I'm thrilled to have your vote for
No,
my bill.
I'm not, I think this is a bad bill, but she can do what you want her to do. She's not doing it. There has to be a reason. And I'm looking in the materials here, and I don't see any formal endorsement from the Secretary. Mr. Correa, anything you want to add?
Last year, DHS actually expressed concerns with this legislation, and to the author of this legislation, all of us, I think, are working hard to make sure the homeland is not attacked. But I'm just saying that a lot of the stuff that is required in this legislation, geographic location of the encounter, where these encounters were made, interior, exterior, a lot of this stuff I think is not necessary because it does compromise national security. But don't ask me, ask DHS. They're the ones that can publish, and clearly they've chosen not to.
So to close, let me just say that Ms. Green was very clear in her tweet that she would have voted no on reconciliation if she knew what was in it. But now that she knows what's in it, she's relying on hope that the Senate will do the right thing, when, quite frankly, we actually could have fixed it right here in the Rules Committee. And tweets and statements are great, but the only thing that matters around here are votes. And everything else is BS. If you want to vote the opposite of what you say, I mean, that's why people are very, very cynical around here. But you had an opportunity, when we had that revote, to actually get this committee and this House to strip that provision from the bill. And you chose to vote basically against what you said. And again, I think this bill that we're dealing with right now, I mean, the problems with this bill, don't take my word for it, but the Department of Homeland Security, headed by Kristi Noem, who could do this, you know, without all of this, is not doing it. It has to beg the question, there's something more to this. In any event, I thank you both for being here. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. As we all know, laws often last longer than any one administration. And if we were discussing AI today, I'd go into the good reasons, and I look forward to a conversation, the good reasons why we want to force a national, consistent policy on AI as opposed to having 50 or 51 different versions. I now recognize Mr. Scott for his time of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman Green, I want you to know I was at the border the 15th, 16th, and 17th, and Department of Homeland Security has this information. They told me exactly how many countries they had intercepted people from and exactly how many people were paroled in the country. And I'll go back to what the chair just said. Laws transition administrations. And the one thing the Biden administration would have never done is to publish the information about how many people were being allowed into this country from other places where we know they are harboring terrorists. And so, you know, the Democrats want people to believe that all of the immigration is from the Western Hemisphere. That's just not true. It's coming from a lot of places like Iran, places like Afghanistan, places like Pakistan. There are a lot of people that are spending a lot of money. Now you have to spend a lot of money to fly across the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean to get to the Western Hemisphere. So they're transiting the oceans, and then they're making their way up, and the ones we catch, they were paroling or allowing to go free into our country. I hope that the Secretary will publish it if this law passes or not. And I hope the law passes because I hope whoever the next Secretary is will have to publish it. I think we should keep a running total from every country of how many people are illegally released into our country. And I'll tell you this, if the general public knew how many people and from what countries they had been released into this country from, Donald Trump would have probably gotten more votes than he got in the last presidential election. So I commend you for your legislation. I intend to vote for it. And, you know, I do hope that the Secretary will go ahead and publish this, whether this law passes or not, because the American citizens need to know who has been released into this country, or at least where they came from. With that, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Scanlon for her time of questioning.
Thank you. I haven't heard anyone say that they don't support an effort to have more transparency from Homeland Security. I'm reading it here in the minority views, the majority views. So there seems to be agreement about the general concept, but it's the mechanism that we're talking about here today that's probably not ready for prime time. And I think that's the concern I'm hearing from every direction. Mr. Correa, is there a statement of administrative policy here? Has the administration said whether it supports or doesn't support?
Again, thank you, Ms. Scanlon, for that question. Last year, DHS did express concerns with this legislation, last year.
Okay.
And this year, apparently have not come forward in support or in opposition.
They may be busy otherwise.
Yes.
So that remains the concern, I think, for certainly on our side of the dais, that, you know, while it may be well-intentioned, that this might undermine national security by tipping off the bad guys, I think, as it was put.
Scanlon, I've gone to the targeting center of the Department of Homeland Security, just right outside of Washington, D.C., There's a lot of information they have, and a lot of SIAs, other suspected terrorists, a lot of information they've asked me specifically not to disclose. So I would put a lot of this information in that category. They won't disclose this information because they don't deem it, or I should say they deem it damaging to national security.
Well, that certainly seems like something that should be resolved. Maybe it explains why this isn't something that's going, under
At the very
suspension
least,
of
I'd
rules.
like to see DHS ask for this legislation specifically and how they want this legislation written.
Okay.
And I think there, we could have some guidance as to what specifically is needed and what is okay to share with, not only with the American public, but with our enemies as well.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Mr. Norman for his time of questions.
Thank you for putting this forward. Thank both of you for showing up. I intend to support the legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Leisure Fernandez for
Thank you.
her time of
Ver-
questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I found the earlier questioning quite interesting because what it comes down to is courage. It comes down to courage. A tweet is a tweet, but what we do here in this House is vote. And so if you are going to say I'm against something, then show it with your vote. But I want to get to this legislation. And what I'm hearing is we don't have a problem, and in fact, it would be very useful. Democrats don't have a problem. I love it when they say Democrats say, no, we do not. We do not have a problem identifying where the special interests, the SIAs, come from. It's just, why would you give away sensitive information about where we are apprehending them? I think that's basically it. It's a simple thing. I haven't asked you a question,
Okay.
Madam.
No sensitive
Green.
information is provided through the bill.
Lou Correa, I think Representative Correa, I think that's basically the point about this, right?
And right now, it's my understanding that DHS does publish the number of people encountered by country every month. So they're already publishing the information that I would consider, or they would consider, safe. If they wanted to publish additional information, they could, but they don't.
Yeah.
And for us to mandate that, I think is, we should do it if they ask us to do it, but
Yeah.
not on our own.
So Representative Scott's point about needing to know where people are coming from, that you just explained that already happens.
That's correct. It is published already.
Okay, great. Now, I did want to ask one last question, Representative Correa. Should the United States be worried about increased terrorist activity against our country as a result of President Trump joining in the Israel-Iran war effort? I mean, these are things that we should be concerned about because there are lasting effects from that. From your position, what are your thoughts on that?
I think so, but I think we should always be concerned about foreign attacks, foreign terrorist attacks in our country. Remember 9/11? There was challenges around the world, but that essentially came out of nowhere. Failure of our national intelligence agencies. In my area in California, though, it's domestic terrorists that have claimed more lives than foreign terrorists. So in my opinion, you just have to look at this issue from a 360-degree perspective, which is you're always looking for that attack that you're not looking for, the unexpected attack. So that's why I respect what DHS does. I tend to work with them and tend to follow their advice and counsel when it comes to legislation.
Right, and that's also why we would want to make sure that people who are being given responsibility in these roles have experience and are not 22-year-old interns, I would assume. Thank you very much, Representative, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Mr. Jack, and we do have one more panel after this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I just want to enter into the record a statement of administration policy that was just released. And for my colleagues on the committee, it says, if H.R. 275 were presented to the President in its current form, his advisors would recommend that he sign it into law. So that is a direct endorsement from this administration of this critical legislation. And I just want to give Chairwoman Green, who leads the committee on which I serve, an opportunity to offer any closing comments before we wrap.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Jack. Just to reiterate, there's no sensitive information provided according to this legislation. No one's name, no one's address, no one's phone number, no one's picture. So for our Democrat colleagues that are saying this would release sensitive information, that's an absolute lie. It would only have DHS release on their website once a month what country of origin the special interest alien was from and what part of the country they came in. That does not damage any law enforcement efforts, investigations. It just tells the American people what special interest aliens are coming in or what country they're coming from and where they came in the country and how many of them came in per month. And to Mr. Scott's point, this would force all administrations going forward to have to provide this information, as well as it would go back 4 years, because Democrats were not transparent under the Biden-Harris administration, not at all. And they're fighting releasing this information now. It's extremely important. There's over 2 million gotaways in our country. On top of the under Biden-Harris administration, there were at least 1.7 million special interest aliens from 26 countries encountered at our border. 1.7 million. That is a tremendous amount. All this legislation would do would force DHS once a month to post the information for the American people who pay all of our salaries, pay for this building, pay for DHS, and pay the great men and women that protect us in Border Patrol. And I thank you, Mr. Jack, and I yield back.
And I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, before I yield, in the words of the Executive Office of the President, passing the bill is an important step in effectively evaluating the threats to our country and equipping Congress and the federal agencies with the right information to decisively act to protect the American people. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
They already have the power to do that.
Gentleman yields back, and appreciate his clarification from the administration that he was able to obtain. With that, we thank you both for being here and appreciate you being in front of the Rules Committee today. We do have another panel, and we're going to try to get it in before we do votes. For members of the committee, it is my understanding that the chairwoman does not plan to call on votes on the rule until after the voting sequence on the floor, just so everybody knows. So we'll be coming back. Yes, but that's the next panel, right? That would be the next panel. Just stay seated, but we got to well, I got him third, but we'll get you in. All right. So I appreciate it. We'll get the next panel up here. Thank you, Congresswoman. We have Representatives Moylan, Mass, and Correa. Am I saying that right? I see you in the gym all the time. Okay, you'll accept it. I apologize. There you go. Well, I know how that is when we get Mr. Mast up here as well. I'm Griffith, Griffin, Griffith, Griffiths, you know, I get them all kinds of different pronunciations. Yeah. All right. I do have us, this is an amendment panel. We're going to try to do it as quickly as we can so that we can get down to votes. And I have Mr. Moylan of Guam up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member and distinguished members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of my 2 amendments that uphold our enduring commitment to our veterans, both those overseas and in the homeland. The first amendment, number 37, would extend authorization for the Department of Veterans Affairs Regional Office in the Republic of the Philippines through September 30th, 2026. This is the only VA regional office located outside the United States and supports over 20,000 American veterans. Under current law, this authority is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year. For the past 5 years, Congress has renewed the authorization on an annual basis, creating uncertainty for veterans, VA personnel, and long-term planning. This amendment offers a responsible 1-year extension to allow the VA to develop a plan for transitioning to the regional office from the Philippines to a permanent location on Guam. Our island is home to one of the highest per capita veteran population in the United States and serves as a vital hub for veterans across the Pacific. Despite this, Guam still lacks a full-service regional office. As a result, veterans must rely on remote support or travel over 3,800 miles to Honolulu for in-person assistance, an unacceptable burden that contributes to delays, limits access, and erodes trust in the system. Establishing a permanent VA presence on Guam is more than an issue of fairness. It's a strategic imperative. With the Department of Defense expanding its footprint in Indo-PACOM and thousands of active duty service members and their families now stationed on Guam, ensuring adequate VA infrastructure is vital to both readiness and retention. This is why my Second Amendment, number 41, urges VA Secretary to begin laying the groundwork for relocating the regional office from Manila and establishing a permanent VA presence on Guam. Our island serves as a key support hub for veterans throughout Asia and the Pacific Islands, and is well positioned to take on this expanded role. Together, these amendments will help ensure Guam has the resources needed to sustain and enhance this critical service. A regional office on Guam would improve the accuracy and timelessness of benefits claims, enhance trust and satisfaction among veterans and their families, and reaffirm our commitment to support all veterans regardless of where they live. For far too long, veterans in Guam and the Pacific have been an afterthought in our VA planning. These two amendments are modest but necessary steps to correct that oversight and ensure no veteran is left behind. Respectfully ask the committee for their support and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize Mr. Mast on his amendment.
Today, I want to talk to you about an amendment that we have passed before in Appropriations, Mass number 84. The specific nature of this is to make sure that funds are not made available to enforce Veterans Health Directive 1315. What that health directive essentially says is that you can't go out there as a veterans health provider and help a veteran with any information as it relates to cannabis. If their states have legal cannabis programs, you can't help them with the paperwork. You can't help advise them on dosages. You can't help them advise them on things that they may be considering as a part of their health. Now, I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't presume to tell people when they should consider cannabis for medical purposes. I am a veteran. I woke up in a hospital called Walter Reed one day, and I can tell you that when I woke up in that hospital, missing 2 legs and a finger, I woke up on a laundry list of narcotics and medications, things I had never been on in my life. I had oxys, morphines, antidepressants, anti-inflammatories, heavy sleep sedatives, a Dilaudid drip, an epidural, and a host of other things going on, none of which I'd ever experienced before. When I became awake and cognizant, I immediately started to wean myself off of all of those things, and within about 6 months, I was off of those narcotics and drugs. What I can tell you about that is, even though I was able to get myself off of those in about 6 months, when I went from the lowest amount to nothing, the lowest amount of the last narcotic, which was oral morphine, to nothing, for probably 2 months, I went through the gambit of withdrawal symptoms, from my food and everything going through me to being up at all hours of the night to probably being the most irritable person beyond what I am right now. And it was nasty. It was painful. I couldn't imagine the effect that these narcotics have on some people that have been on them for years. But the point of this is to say there are alternatives out there. I wouldn't say when those alternatives are appropriate, but I know that it is appropriate if somebody is getting all of their medical health from the Department of Veterans Affairs, that they be able to have that discussion about what they may be considering for their health with that person that is providing their health care. If they can't trust that they can have at least that discussion with that perverse person providing their health care, then the VA is failing them, because one way or another, they're going to look into a path that they're considering. It would be much better if they look into that path under the directive of their doctor. And so that's what my amendment is about, number 84, just making sure that those doctors have the ability to not be prohibited from speaking to those veterans about something that they may be otherwise considering for legal programs in their state. Thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment introduced by myself and Rep. Bergman would essentially direct the Department of Veterans Affairs to evaluate and make recommendations on changes that will be needed to be made to existing healthcare infrastructure so veterans can receive psychedelic-assisted therapies upon FDA approval. December of 2024, the VA announced $1.5 million in funding for clinical research of MDMA-assisted therapy. We're all encouraged by the promising results we've seen so far for treating veterans experiencing PTSD with psychedelics. A number of our colleagues here in Congress have received that treatment with excellent results. These are not traditional therapies. Several ways are different: long hour sessions, long sessions, multiple therapists, additional safety concerns, and special training needs to be considered for those providing this therapy. While MDMA-assisted therapy did not receive FDA approval late last year, everything points to the fact that we are moving in that direction. And VA Secretary Doug Collins just took a tour of one of the centers to review what is actually going on, what actually happens at these centers of psychedelic therapy. We're moving in the right direction. Just want to make sure that the VA is ready to administer this therapy when it is approved. Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman, thank all three of you for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Ms. Scanlon? No questions. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez? I would agree with the gentlelady that we appreciate your testimony very much, very enlightening on some issues that are not standard in many cases, but ones that we need to be aware of. So I appreciate that. And with that, is there anyone else seeking to testify on H.R. 3944, H.R. 875, H.Res. 516, or H.R. 275?
I have a UC request.
A UC request, please state.
I request unanimous consent to insert into the record testimony from Representative Bishop in support of Amendment Number 8, which would direct the GAO to conduct a report on the firing of veteran suicide hotline employees and the impact of those firings on veterans seeking help during the period of decreased staffing from January to June 2025, and the impact of all that on the Veterans Crisis Line.
Without objection?
Thank you.
So ordered. Anything else? All right, without objection, the committee stands in recess until 5 minutes after the last vote on the floor. We are in recess. And this I'm sorry, I left out one of the magic lines. Seeing no additional testimony, this closes the hearing portion of our meeting, and without objection, we'll stand in recess until 5 minutes after all votes.
Seat of a motion from the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I move the committee grant H.R. 3944, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2026, a structured rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The rule provides that an amendment in the nature of a substitute consistent of the text of Rule Committee Print 119-5 shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in the Rules Committee report, amendments en bloc described in Section 3, and pro forma amendments described in Section 4. Each amendment shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment except as provided by Section 4 of the rule, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the Rules Committee report or amendment en bloc described in Section 3 of the rule. The rule provides that the chair of the Committee on Appropriations or his designee may offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in the Rules Committee report not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees, shall not be subject to amendment except as provided by Section 4 of the rule, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule provides that the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees may offer up to 10 pro forma amendments each at any point for the purpose of debate. The rule provides for one motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 275, the Special Interest Alien Reporting Act of 2025 under a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Homeland Security now printed in the bill shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Homeland Security or their respective designees. The rule provides for 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 875, the Jeremy and Angel Seay and Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act of 2025 under a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in nature of substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary now printed in the bill shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. The rule provides for 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of HRS 516, condemning the violent June 2025 riots in Los Angeles, California, under a closed rule. The rule provides that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order to consider HRS 516. The rule provides that the resolution shall be considered as read. Finally, the rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees.
You've heard the motion from Mr. Scott. Is there any discussion or amendment to the rule?
Madam Chair?
Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Just a brief comment. So I'm reading the rule that Mr. Scott just read, and as I read it, we have 3 closed rules, 1 structured rule. Only 32 of amendments were made in order out of 92 submitted. And out of those 32, only 5 are Democrats, 26 are Republicans. So I just want the record to reflect that because I think we could do better, but in any event. But I have a couple of amendments to the rule.
I believe there's also some bipartisan
I
amendments.
think I see 1 bipartisan amendment.
One.
Yeah, 1
Okay.
bipartisan amendment. Again, I think we could do better than that, but in any event, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 27, offered by Representative Levin, which prohibits funds under this act from being used in contravention of the Impoundment Control Act or the Anti-Deficiency Act. This Republican bill does nothing to stop President Trump's and DOJ's illegal abuse of power. Trump wants to cut the VA workforce by over 83,000 by this September and has already illegally fired dozens of workers that help man the VA suicide crisis hotlines. He canceled a program that helps veterans avoid foreclosure and stole $200 million from the military construction projects to help fund his border wall. And why do my Republican colleagues continue to show up for work if you allow the Trump administration to blatantly abuse the laws that we pass? What's the point of passing this bill if the administration is just going to ignore it? So I urge a yes vote on my amendment so that all of my colleagues can go on record and make clear to this administration that we expect them to follow the law. We expect them to actually respect the United States House of Representatives and the United States Congress. What a novel principle. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Any further discussion on the amendment from Mr. McGovern? Hearing none, the questions on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion, Chair, the noes have it. The amendments.
That's for a roll call, Madam Chair.
The chairman, excuse me, Mr. McGovern requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Is there any other amendment or discussion? Mr. McGovern.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 63, offered by Representative Torres, which prohibits the use of federal funds to deport non-citizen U.S. military veterans unless they have had access to legal counsel and a fair hearing before an immigration judge. It also requires the Department of Homeland Security to report to Congress within 180 days on the number of such veterans in removal proceedings, their case outcomes, and whether they had legal representation. And Madam Chair, how is it controversial to say that a non-citizen veteran, someone who fought for America and risked their life to defend us, should at least receive due process, access to a lawyer, and a fair trial before being deported? Several Republicans voted along with Democrats in committee to ensure that our veterans receive basic due process. I hope Republicans on the Rules Committee can similarly vote to protect the rights of veterans. I urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the questions
Madam
on...
Chair,
sorry,
Madam
Ms.
Chair, I
Ledger.
would just like to express my support for this amendment, and especially because it has been bipartisan, to allow the House to vote on this, to recognize the service that has been provided by these non-citizen members of our military. They're willing to give their life for our country. We should at least give them due process. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the questions on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion chair, the noes have it. The amendment's not
Ask
agreed
for a
to.
roll call on that.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments or discussion? Ms.
Madam Chair.
Leisure Fernandez.
I move the committee make an order amendment number 17 to H.R. 3944, offered by Representative Frankel, which strikes Section 255, which prohibits federal funding for abortion. It's an outrage that Republicans think it's okay for a woman to serve this nation and fight for our freedoms, but then restrict her freedom to reproductive health in return. The Milcon VA bill is supposed to provide veterans with the dignity and care they deserve through the VA health system, whatever zip code they reside in. The VA should provide equal access to health care for veterans. This bill denies our women veterans, and we must recognize that women are increasingly stepping up and offering to serve our country. We can't just thank our veterans for their service. We need to provide them the care they deserve and that they have earned. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back and urge a yes vote on my amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment by Ms. Leisure Fernandez? Hearing none, the questions on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. 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 In the opinion chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Recorded vote.
Ms. Leisure Fernandez requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no. Ms. Houchin is not, Mrs. Houchin is not recorded. No. Mrs. Houchin, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
And the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Is there further discussion or amendments? Hearing no further discussion, the question is on the motion from the gentleman from Georgia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is
We
agreed
ask for a
to.
roll call.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call. The clerk will will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
Yes.
Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman, aye. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy, aye. Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, aye. Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, aye. Mr. Jack?
Aye.
Mr. Jack, aye. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Scanlon? No. Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Neguse? No. Mr. Neguse, no. Ms. Leisure Fernandez? No. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, no. Madam Chair?
Aye.
Madam Chair, aye.
The clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 4 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to report is agreed to. Accordingly, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, will be managing this rule for the majority, and Mr. McGovern for the minority. Hearing no further discussion, the meeting is adjourned.